The 10,043rd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is implementation of the note by the President of the Security Council, working methods of the Security Council. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Angola, Australia, Austria, Bahrain, Brazil, Burundi, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Ecuador, Egypt, El Salvador, Estonia, Germany, India, Indonesia, Italy, Japan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Libya, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Maldives, Malta, Mexico, Morocco, Norway, Paraguay, the Philippines, Portugal, Romania, Singapore, South Africa, Spain, Switzerland, Thailand, Ukraine, and the United Arab Emirates to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the following briefers to participate in this meeting. Ms. Lauren Sivers, Director, Security Council Procedure and co-author of the Procedure of the UN Security Council, and Ms. Shamala Kadia Thompson, Executive Director, Security Council Report. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2025/719, a letter dated 6 November 2025 from the Permanent Representative of Sierra Leone to the United Nations, addressed to the Secretary General, transmitting a concept paper on the item under consideration. At this meeting, the Security Council will hear briefings by Ms. Lauren Sivers, Ms. Shamala Kadia Thompson, and Ambassador Christina Marcos Lassen, Permanent Representative of Denmark to the United Nations, in her capacity as co-chair of the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions. I'll now give the floor to Ms. Lauren Sivers.
Mr. President, co-chairs of the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions, members of the Security Council, my fellow briefer Shamala Kandia, and colleagues and former friends and former colleagues from the Security Council Affairs Division. All other days of the year, when the Security Council meets in this chamber, it is to take up a country or region-specific matter or thematic issue which relates substantively to the Council's primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. Thus, these annual open debates on working methods are unique in that this is the one day of each year when Council members and the wider UN membership meet to discuss how, by what modalities, the Council works to carry out this primary responsibility. And these open debates have developed over the years into an important opportunity for stock-taking and brainstorming. There are a number of working methods issues that will be prominent in today's discussion because of their impact on how the Security Council functions and how it is perceived. These include increasing opportunities for pen-holding and pen-holding best practices, improving the process for appointing chairs of the Council's subsidiary organs, maintaining a balance between public and private meetings, enhancing relations with the wider UN membership, particularly troop contributing and police contributing countries, and the 2026 appointment process for the next Secretary General. And I know speakers will be endeavoring to generate new thinking on these and other important issues. The question of how the Security Council conducts its meetings has become increasingly important over this past year. Given the urgent crises on the Council's agenda, the world has been closely following what happens in this chamber. Of course, people focus primarily on the statements made and voting on draft resolutions here. But even when council members and non-member participants demonstrate starkly differing positions, the Security Council and the UN itself can gain credibility or lose credibility depending on how orderly and professionally council meetings are conducted. This is why today I would like to focus on 3 areas of working methods that relate to the Council's formal public meetings. The first area is the participation in Council meetings of non-Council member states. There have been contentions voiced during meetings or in statements released afterwards that a non-member was not invited when it should have been. Conversely, there have been complaints that a non-member was invited to participate despite objections raised by a council member or even a non-member. Such disputes over participation risk creating ill will on both sides. Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure gives as one criterion for participation that the Council consider the interests of a non-member to be specially affected. Interestingly, the Security Council did not itself invent this term. Rather, the drafters of the UN Charter considered the opportunity for non-members to participate in Council meetings to be so important that they provided for it in Article 31, where the term specially affected originates, and also in Article 32. Charter commentaries note that it is hard to give a definitive interpretation to the term specially affected, although geographic proximity appears to be one leading factor. In addition, it is generally considered that when one party to a situation is invited to participate, any other party to that situation should also be invited if they so request. But the Council must make these decisions on a case-by-case basis. There is also the issue of timing of requests to participate. That is, whether there should be, prior to a meeting, an established cutoff after which requests would no longer be considered. These questions deserve careful attention. For this reason, it is a positive step that the informal working group is considering how the Council can develop more consistent practice regarding participation. It is a question of finding the right balance between giving fair access to non-members while also respecting the need for moderation in numbers. A second issue that has emerged during formal meetings is the showing of visual materials. Increasingly, Council members and non-members have been holding up photos in the chamber. For many, this detracts from the focus and decorum of a meeting. On this point, I can clarify from my former experience in the Security Council Affairs Division that there has long been an understanding that visuals displayed in the chamber should be of evidentiary caliber. This is not to equate the Security Council with a court, but to hold that visuals should be employed only to substantiate a factual point, not to create drama or merely stir emotions. In the case of showing films in the chamber, the past practice has been first to obtain the Council's approval. So concerning the question of visuals as well, it is constructive that the informal working group is presently discussing possible guidelines. The third issue I would like to raise is the rate of delivering statements. The introduction of time limits for remarks at Council meetings has helped make discussions more targeted and concise. The downside, however, has been that in order to fit within given time limits, many speakers are racing through their statements. Even when participants read prepared remarks, this can be done in such a way that listeners still feel that genuine dialogue is taking place. But if participants speak at an excessive rate, this can give the opposite impression that no one is really listening to anyone else. Reading statements too fast also challenges the principle of UN multilingualism. The Council's Rule 42 provides that speeches made in any of the 6 languages of the Security Council shall be interpreted into the other 5 languages. We remember that this means a member may deliver their statement in any of the UN languages, but we sometimes forget this also means members are entitled to listen to statements in the language they choose. It is not unusual for nuanced statements of policy to be made in this chamber, and the UN interpreters must be given the time necessary to be able to accurately reflect these nuances. I would like to close by observing that since last year's Working Methods Open Debate, there have been significant achievements. Among these certainly is the adoption of the 4th Comprehensive Presidential Note, S. 2024-507. Considerable credit is owed to last year's Council members, notably Japan serving as chair of the informal working group, since this accomplishment was not easily achieved. The 2024 note comprises 168 paragraphs, which is 105 more paragraphs than the very first 507 note adopted in 2006. This validates the view that improving and refining the Council's working methods is a continuous, ongoing process, and a process to which I know today's debate will make a meaningful contribution. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. Sievers for her briefing. I now give the floor to Ms. Shamala Kadia-Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Co-chairs of the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, SCAD colleagues, and my fellow briefer, Lorraine Sievers. Thank you for inviting Security Council report to address this Council's open debate on working methods. It is a privilege for SCR to brief the Council on an issue that is core to the work of our organization. When SCR was launched 20 years ago, one of its main aims was to bring greater transparency to the work of the Security Council. And having witnessed the evolution of the Council over these 2 decades, I've seen firsthand how working methods, even small procedural shifts, can meaningfully shape its ability to act. Today I will cover 3 areas: the appointment of subsidiary body chairs, informal meeting formats, and the selection process for the next Secretary General. So first, turning to the appointment of subsidiary body chairs and vice chairs. I will not dwell on the reasons for why the appointment of the 2025 subsidiary body chairs and vice chairs was delayed until 29th May of this year. That story is well known to all of you. Suffice to say, it led to a serious disruption in the work of the subsidiary bodies, and while this was the latest that this decision has been made, members have found it hard to agree by 1st of October, the date proposed in Note 507. And reaching agreement on the allocation of chairs is affected by the composition of incoming members, their level of interest in chairing particular bodies, and of course, which subsidiary bodies are available in that year. It appears that in some years, the mix of available subsidiary bodies and incoming members made for easier choices than in others. And further complicating matters, the permanent members who still play a central role in the appointment process often have strong views about the suitability of particular members to chair certain committees. So what can be done to improve this appointment process? I'd like to offer some ideas that come from talking to members over the years as they go through it. So one would be providing the incoming 5 with an early understanding of the respective roles of the informal working group chairs and the P5 coordinator, who help to facilitate the appointment process. This would be useful. The P5 coordinators change in line with their 3-monthly cycle, and having just one P5 member throughout the process could also make this easier. A briefing by the Secretariat immediately after the Security Council elections in June could provide incoming members with information that would be useful in deciding which subsidiary bodies to chair. One of the problems has been that not all delegations are ready to make those choices. Possible options for allowing subsidiary bodies to function when there's no agreement by the 31st of December include moving away from the allocation of subsidiary bodies as a package deal. This would allow bodies that are not contentious to continue their work, and chairs continuing into a second year would not be affected. Understand that this is something Ms. Sievers has also suggested in the past. Having the pen holders for country-specific issues, which are mostly permanent members, chair the subsidiary bodies of those files until an agreement is reached is another possibility. And considering, or to consider having each subsidiary body to have one vice chair that remains in the council, and having that vice chair assume the responsibilities of the chair if there's no decision by 31st December. I know none of these are perfect options, but they are things to think about. I'll now turn to the informal meeting formats. Rule 48 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure states that unless it decides otherwise, the Council shall meet in public. This has given the Council considerable freedom to create informal meeting formats as needed. For example, in 1982, the Arya Formula meeting format was born because a Bosnian Croat priest had a story to tell about the conflict in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and there was no appropriate format for a confidential briefing by a civil society briefer. In 2008, the Informal Interactive Dialogue, or IID format, was created because the Council needed a way to speak with the African Union and the League of Arab States about the ICC arrest warrant against Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. They needed a closed format that was not formal. And this format was then used the following year for a series of conversations around the conflict in Sri Lanka, which was not on the Council's agenda. These examples show that when there has been a need, the Council has found a way. Today, there is a need for the Council to build trust and better relations away from the public eye. Open meetings are useful for conveying member state positions, but they do not allow for the type of interaction that leads to solutions and stronger outcomes. While informal consultations were conceived as a format for frank discussion of sensitive issues facing the Council, there's long been criticism that members largely reiterate their public views behind closed doors. So it may be time to better utilize some of these informal formats available to Council members. The IID format, for one, is a format that could be used more regularly for closed-door conversations with governments that are hosting UN missions and with affected parties. Closed Arya Formula meetings would allow for more private discussions with civil society briefers who may be more comfortable providing frank analysis behind closed doors. SOFA Talks, a format suggested at a time when tensions were high in the Council over Syria, were meant to allow members to build trust through informal meetings with no formal agenda. These SOFA Talks took place regularly in 2018 and 2019, but they have been used very infrequently in recent years. And members could consider reinstating this format as a monthly occurrence, possibly. In addition, members could encourage the Secretary General to restart the Secretary General's annual retreat with Council members, which were held for about 20 years, but appear to have stopped a few years ago. These usually took place in May, outside New York City, and once it was held in Sweden. During its presidency in January 2021, Norway organized a President's Retreat focused on preventive diplomacy and mediation. Council presidencies could organize similar retreat-like meetings on specific topics. Taking members outside UN meeting rooms can stimulate real engagement, build relationships among members, and generate new ideas. Such informal settings could be a useful forum for promoting the trust and understanding so often at the heart of effective diplomacy. And I'll now move to the next Secretary General and this selection process. Council members are currently negotiating the joint letter from the President of the Security Council and the President of the General Assembly, which is expected to provide the guidelines for the nomination of candidates. and will mark the formal start of the selection process. If the 2015-2016 timetable is adhered to, the joint letter would be issued by the end of the year. Having followed and reported on the 2016 process closely, I'd like to make the following observation. Many of the changes implemented during the last selection process have been well documented, but some of the details of the process in the Security Council are not that well known, particularly the conduct of straw polls. In 2016, there were a number of non-papers on the modalities for straw polls which were not made public. The permanent members, I would assume, probably have them in their filing cabinets or their shared drives, but the E10 are unlikely to have access to them. It would be helpful if there were a way to preserve these documents and make them available to elected members. More broadly, it would be good for elected members to have access to a comprehensive repository of documents on the selection process. In 2026, elected members have 5 of the 6 presidencies between June and December, and these are crucial months for the straw polls. An understanding of the conduct of the straw polls, including when and how to hold them, is particularly important for a presidency in the year a new Secretary General is selected and appointed. As the Council begins the search for the next Secretary General, I wish all Council members all the best in working together to find the best person to lead the UN into the next phase. And to conclude, I believe that working methods are all the more essential as a guide for Council members as they navigate a world in flux and a multilateral system that's morphing into something new but as yet unknown. While geopolitical factors are critical in determining the Council's effectiveness, investing in improving this body's working methods can help inspire creative solutions for maintaining international peace and security in these difficult times. I thank you.
I thank Ms. Thompson for a briefing. And I'll give the floor to Ambassador Christina Marcos Lassin.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the co-chairs of the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions, Denmark and Pakistan. At the outset, we would like to thank Sierra Leone for organizing this critical open debate. We also welcome our briefers, Lorraine Sievers of Security Council Procedure and Shamla Kandia of Security Council Report, to the Chamber today. They are undeniable experts, and their organizations remain go-to resources for Security Council expertise. Mr. President, we are all aware that the Security Council holds the primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. It does so on behalf of all member states. However, to fulfill that mandate effectively, the Council must not only act decisively, but also operate in a manner that is transparent, inclusive, and worthy of the confidence of the wider membership through its working methods. Today's open debate is a recognition of this fact. It is also an acknowledgement that the Security Council does not hold a monopoly on good ideas. We therefore look forward to the concrete suggestions and proposals from all speakers here today. Mr. President, in our discussions on the Council's working methods, our aim should not be to reopen settled debates arbitrarily, but to build on the foundation laid by Note 507. On the one hand, we must ensure that our procedures are fit for purpose and that they are implemented consistently. On the other, we should not be afraid to adapt them to meet new realities and new challenges as they arise. Indeed, since the adoption of Note 507 in 2017, 17 new notes have been adopted and subsequently incorporated and streamlined into the updated note last year. As co-chairs of the Informal Working Group, we've also identified several core topics for discussion while maintaining the flexibility needed to address emerging issues. Mr. President, our first IWG meeting was held on 21st July of this year, more than halfway through the year. The unprecedented delay in the allocation of the chairs and vice chairs of the subsidiary bodies sets a clear reminder. The Council's working methods are not merely procedural formalities, but the very mechanism that enable it to function effectively. When these processes are delayed or disrupted, the Council's capacity to work effectively is hindered. Clarifying and improving the procedures outlined in Note 507 on this process is therefore essential for the Council's work. Mr. President, as the high number of inscriptions on today's speaker list demonstrates, the wider UN membership has a keen interest in how this Council operates. It is our view that Rule 37 and Rule 39 participants enhance the deliberations of the Council. That is true for open debates, but also for debates and briefings where the voices of those concerned and affected are highly relevant. As a Council, we should therefore work to ensure that this crucial role as avenue for wider participation and inclusivity is consistently, transparently, and fairly applied. As co-chairs, we stand ready to facilitate further discussion on this critical topic and welcome suggestions on a consensus-based path forward. Mr. President, as the year draws to a close, the Council approaches one of its most significant responsibilities, namely this process of selections of the next Secretary General. Despite the Charter devoting only 17 words to it, this process is, at its core, a matter of working methods. In the coming months, the Council will be discussing how it votes, how it engages with candidates, how it informs the wider membership of its progress and its outcomes. These are fundamentally questions of process and working methods, and we believe they should be guided by the principles of transparency, inclusivity, and predictability, that the process should be structured and timely, that all Council members engage actively and equally. In closing, Mr. President, ultimately working methods are the vehicle through which the Council implements its mandate. They are not a technical afterthought, but a political tool in our collective pursuit to maintain international peace and security. As co-chairs of the IWG, Denmark and Pakistan are committed to a Security Council that is accountable, effective, transparent, and representative. We'll continue to engage with all Council members and listen to the views of the wider membership. Following today's debate, we prepare an analytical co-chair summary and facilitate a discussion on the suggestions raised in the upcoming meetings of the IWG. We look forward to the ideas and proposals from all member states in this regard. I thank you.
I thank Ambassador Lassin for a briefing on behalf of the co-chairs of the Informal Working Group, Denmark and Pakistan. And I'll give the floor to those Council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. And thank you to our briefers. We all collectively benefit from your exceptional institutional knowledge and continued close following of the Council's evolving working methods. Let me also thank Denmark and Pakistan for your joint stewardship of the Informal Working Group on documentation and other procedural questions. Underlining the United Kingdom's approach to working methods is our desire for an action-oriented Security Council that is able to build consensus and reach compromises through constructive and informed debate. So the United Kingdom welcomes today's open debate as an opportunity to reiterate our commitment to the full implementation of Note 507, which underwent a significant update under Japan's leadership of the Informal Working Group last year. At that time, we were pleased to work with Council members to make amendments to enhance the Security Council's transparency and accountability, while still preserving the important principle of confidentiality, including in areas such as access to historic documentation. We are committed to responsible and effective penholding, taking into account views of countries concerned and of the region, including in both bilateral discussions and through their participation in relevant Council meetings under Rule 37, and we remain resolute in seeking to build consensus across this Council. This includes, where appropriate and mutually agreeable, co-penning products, as we have done, for example, with the African members of the Council on Libya and Sudan. We note the impact the delay in agreeing subsidiary body chairs this year has had on committee work, and we look forward to working with all current and incoming Council members to come to agreement on a package for 2025 to give incoming chairs sufficient time to prepare. As members of the Security Council, we all have a stake in preserving its integrity and upholding its mandate to maintain international peace and security. To that end, the United Kingdom remains committed to working with everyone around this table to continually review the Council's working methods in a collective effort to strengthen its effectiveness and efficiency. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the 10 elected members of the Security Council, namely Algeria, Denmark, Greece, Guyana, Panama, Sierra Leone, Somalia, Slovenia, the Republic of Korea, and Pakistan. We thank the briefers, Laurence Sievers, Shamala Kandia Thompson, and Ambassador Christina Larsen, my co-chair of the Informal Working Group, for their invaluable inputs on improving the working methods of the Security Council. We, the elected members, take very seriously the responsibility entrusted upon us through our election by the United Nations General Assembly. We are committed to a council that demonstrates both the determination and the capability to take decisive action, fulfills its mandate effectively, and is more transparent, inclusive, responsive, and representative. We stress that Note 507 remains a living document that requires continuous review. In this regard, updating the note as necessary in response to contemporary needs is crucial for the Council's effectiveness, and at the same time, it is equally important that the Council reviews, updates, and streamlines those working methods that no longer align with the current realities in the interest of improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the Council. In this vein, we welcome the comprehensive update of Note 507 last year under the leadership of Japan. Allow me to highlight a few issues of priority. First, we stress the need for an early appointment of chairs and vice chairs of the Council's subsidiary bodies, which is essential not only for the smooth functioning of the subsidiary bodies, but also to help maintain continuity among the outgoing, current, and incoming elected members. The process must be carried out in an efficient, timely, transparent, and structured manner, and the agreement of elected members on the distribution of seats must be respected. We emphasize that the practice of having elected members chair subsidiary bodies is a hard-won reform aimed at ensuring more balanced and inclusive participation in the Council's work. The process of selection should be pursued with equal involvement of all Council members. The contingency measure on distribution of chairs should not be interpreted as allowing time until the end of January or beyond, and all efforts must be made to agree on appointment for the following year, preferably by 1st October. We regret that this deadline has not been met once again this year, and we encourage all Council members to engage constructively to reach consensus. Any contingency measures for delayed appointments under exceptional circumstances must be strictly time-bound and should not normalize expanded roles for its presidencies in the work of the subsidiary bodies. Second, there is a broad recognition for more meaningful and effective participation of elected members in pen holding. The legitimacy and effectiveness of the Council can be greatly improved through a more inclusive and representative approach to penholdership. The provisions of Note 507 in this regard, including the need to ensure that the arrangement of penholder or co-penholder reflects openness, a shared responsibility, and fair burden sharing, must be implemented by having more elected members assume this responsibility on an equitable basis. Equally important is the conduct of penholders and co-penholders, which must adhere to the provisions of Note 507. This adherence includes, on one hand, the need to informally consult countries directly involved or specifically affected and to take into full consideration their views and concerns, and on the other hand, the need to ensure that the drafting of all documents, such as resolutions, presidential statements, and press statements, is carried out in an inclusive and respectful manner. Penholdership should abide by objectivity and impartiality during the drafting and negotiation process and prioritize forging consensus and promoting the unity of the Council. Third, the E10 welcomed the continuation of the practice for Council presidencies to circulate and implement monthly working methods commitments as stipulated in Note 507. We encourage all Council members to prepare such commitments. Fourth, recognizing the relevance of Rule 37, we reaffirm the need to ensure the participation of states that are directly affected or geographically proximate to a situation under the Council's consideration. The inclusion of such states, as well as representatives of the Secretariat and other relevant persons under Rule 39, provides valuable context and contributes to more balanced and informed deliberations and decision-making. Fifth, access to relevant documentation for E10 members is necessary to ensure fairness, transparency, and equality. We recognize the achievement that the inclusion of new provisions in Note 507, initiated by Algeria, represent in affirming that all members of the Security Council shall be afforded the same level of access to documentation to ensure equal examination of issues under active consideration. We further recognize the necessity for these provisions to be fully implemented and reinforced to allow guaranteed access to documentation for all members and call upon all Council members to continue discussions aimed at strengthening the process while safeguarding the efficient functioning of the Council. Sixth, we believe that the perspectives of civil society, including women civil society briefers, bring added value to Council's deliberations while fully respecting the intergovernmental nature of the Council. We welcome the updates to Note 507 on mitigating the risks and threats of reprisals and ensuring the full, safe, and meaningful participation of these briefers in our work, and encourage further discussion, including on how to promote best practices on the promotion of a zero-tolerance approach. For the safety of civil society briefers, all efforts should be made to prevent and respond to threats and reprisals in coordination with OHCHR and other relevant UN civil society partners. Seventh, the Council should strengthen its engagement with the wider UN membership and its cooperation with the General Assembly and other UN bodies, notably the Peacebuilding Commission. The Council and its subsidiary bodies should actively, in a timely manner and with more specific requests, seek the valuable advice that the PBC can provide, including on preventive diplomacy and cooperation with local actors, regional and sub-regional organizations in the country-specific, regional and thematic files, as well as on the formation, review, and drawdown of peace operations mandates with a view to reflecting the longer-term perspective required for peace building and sustaining peace, and to enrich the discussion on mandates and the potential for cooperation on field missions. The Council should also strengthen cooperation with the PBC in relation to countries transitioning off its agenda with due respect for national ownership. Eighth, the provisions contained in Note 507 on enhancing interaction and consultation with troop and police contributing countries must be fully implemented, including with regard to urgent situations that affect their operations, in cases of transition from a peacekeeping operation to peace building, and on major operational changes such as withdrawal, downsizing, or termination. Ninth, targeted sanctions are an important tool available to the Council to ensure the maintenance of international peace and security. They are therefore critical to the execution of the mandate of this Council. We strongly believe in the need to strengthen due process, fairness, and clarity of UN sanctions procedures, thus increasing the legitimacy and effectiveness of UN sanctions regimes. We stress their function as a preventive measure. Sanctions must not have adverse humanitarian consequences for civilian populations, nor adversely affect humanitarian activities carried out by the humanitarian organizations or UN agencies. And in this regard, we recall the adoption of Resolution 2664 of 2022 and 2761 of 2024, which introduced cross-cutting humanitarian exemptions for United Nations sanctioned regimes and underlined the need for their implementation at the national level. The newly established informal working group on sanctions can play a critical role in the review and improvement of UN sanctions. 10th, Mr. President, in response to the growing urgency to increase the effectiveness of the ability of the United Nations to maintain international peace and security, the E10 members underscore the urgent need for comprehensive reform of the Security Council through the process of intergovernmental negotiations mandated by the General Assembly, as also affirmed in the Pact for the Future, in order to make the Council more effective, efficient, representative, inclusive, transparent, accountable, and democratic. There is need to redress the historical injustice against Africa as a priority while treating Africa as a special case. 11th, we urge continued engagement with regional organizations, which also speaks to the importance of Chapter 8 of the UN Charter in executing the mandate of the Council. And 12th, recommending the next Secretary General of the UN to the General Assembly will constitute one of the most important tasks for the Security Council in 2025-26. The E10 aim to play an active and constructive role with the objective of increasing the transparency, predictability, and inclusivity of the process while promoting effective engagement with the candidates and keeping the broader membership regularly informed. Lastly, the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in the work of the Council remains a high priority. There is a need for integrating gender perspectives across the working methods. We also encourage UN briefers to integrate WPS issues and gender analysis into their briefings to the Council. All efforts should be undertaken to increase gender inclusivity. Mr. President, we remain concerned over the frequent use of the veto. In recent months, the Council failed to adopt important resolutions due to the use of the veto. The use or threat of use of the veto may prevent the Council from acting on vital topics, even regarding measures that have already been decided upon by the Council itself in the past. The E10 reiterates its call for restraint on the use of and limits on the scope of the veto. To conclude, We, the 10 elected members of the Security Council, speak with one voice to reaffirm our commitment today to live up to the responsibility bestowed upon us through our election by the members of the United Nations to work together towards a more transparent, inclusive, representative council for all, one capable of taking timely and effective action with the aim of contributing to the maintenance of international peace and security. And I beg your indulgence, this statement is long, but it is on behalf of the E10, so we had to say all that we wanted to say. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement delivered on behalf of the E10 members. And I'll give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to begin by thanking our briefers, Madam Sievers and Madam Thompson, and I will wish to thank Denmark and Pakistan for their initiatives at the helm of the informal working group on working methods, and Sierra Leone for the conduct of this important debate. The Security Council needs to be in a position to fulfill its role for the maintenance of international peace and security. These are its duties and responsibilities conferred upon it by the Charter. Working methods are the engine for open multilateralism rooted in universal values and framed by the values which we defend. It is through this that the Council exercises its mandate. It is our collective responsibility to ensure that Council working methods evolve with the times in order to enhance the efficiency and legitimacy of the Council. In this respect, we welcome the significant work done in 2024 for the updating of Note 507, which is an important framework document on recent practice of the Council and the provisions adopted in the conduct of its work. I will limit myself to 3 remarks since I'm speaking on behalf of France exclusively. First and foremost, the Council should not lose its decisional and operational character and nature. There's a need to strike a balance between public diplomacy and work behind closed doors. Public meetings are useful. They facilitate transparency about the work of the Council. They also help to ensure the voices of women in civil society are heard. However, it is necessary for us to preserve time for closed-door discussions to facilitate frank, direct dialogue among members of the Council. Given the multiplication, proliferation of crises, the Council cannot merely be loquacious. Compliance with speaking times and open debates is important to ensure that the time and resources are used judiciously. We need to ensure that the work of the Council never loses sight of reality on the ground, which is related thereto. Efforts to ensure greater streamlining and clarity in texts produced by the Council are necessary, beginning with the mandates of peacekeeping operations. France will contribute to, and we believe that consultations, close consultations with the UN parties, troop contributing countries, and neighboring states and regional states are important. They are essential, and we will continue to see to that being the case. Codification is not a panacea. There's a need for collective engagement in seeking solutions, and better working methods cannot supplant the spirit of responsibility and compromise. To exercise responsibility, there's a need for in good faith engagement in negotiations to generate the necessary compromise for the Council to deliberate and decide for the benefit of international peace and security. There's a need for a consensus and convergence, respect for the rules and the rhythm of negotiations to ensure that all members of the Council can express their positions for them to be taken into account. Pen holders bear the primary responsibility in this regard. This includes prioritizing ideas above and beyond merely seeking to advance national priorities. Every member of the Council needs to have a sense of responsibility to ensure unanimity in our shared pronouncements. There's a need to avoid using the Council as a platform for disinformation, saturating meetings with pure propaganda by making it a mockery and inviting unconventional briefers. The quality and the seriousness of our discussions determines the credibility and the legitimacy of the Council. Lastly, beyond working methods, the Council itself needs to evolve. France is promoting ambitious reform in composition, which needs to be more representative. This includes expansion of 2 categories of membership, each with related prerogatives and with particular attention on Africa, whose presence, greater presence, particularly among permanent members France supports. In order to break the deadlock that the Council encounters, permanent members need to exercise the veto in a reasonable way. Since 2015, France, together with Mexico, have advanced the initiative for voluntarily and collectively refraining from casting a veto in the event of mass atrocities. This is supported by 107 states. We call upon states, particularly permanent members, to join this initiative. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement and now give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин председатель,
Mr. President, we are grateful to the permanent representative of Denmark, for her, Christina Lassen, for the statement, and the co-chair, Pakistan Asim Ahmad, in the leadership of the work of the informal working group of the Security Council on documentation and procedural questions. We listened attentively to the briefings from Madam Lorraine Sievers and Shamala Kandya. The Russian Federation consistently voices our support for the Security Council's annual discussion of the matter of its working methods in an open format. We believe that the conduct of a periodic review allows for potential ways to continue to fine-tune and streamline the work of the Council to be determined. In recent years, the Council has managed to achieve significant progress in this regard. Many practical proposals and initiatives voiced by member states at the Council Chamber have formed the basis for a compendium of Security Council working practices, which is known as Presidential Note 507. Its significance is difficult to overestimate. This document is being actively used by non-permanent members as a serious source, and it remains an important basis in the work of the Security Council. We trust that today's discussion will also contribute to the activity of the informal working group, and the fresh new ideas will help to facilitate the enrichment of subsequent discussions in this format. We naturally, with the understanding that the working methods themselves and any steps to modify them were and are the prerogative of the membership of the Security Council. Any reform in this regard need to be thoroughly fleshed out and geared towards genuinely and not theoretically enhancing efficiency, taking into account the specificity of the nature and the sensitive nature of the plethora of matters on its agenda, as well as the importance of ensuring their effective implementation. We welcome the efforts of previous chairs of the informal working group on streamlining the Security Council's working methods, which constitute the basis for the subsequent presidential notes, which are geared towards enhancing the effectiveness of the work of the Council, including its subsidiary bodies. The result of joint work of members of the Security Council in 2024 was the adoption of an updated Presidential Note 507. We call upon the current chairs of the working group, namely Denmark and Pakistan, to focus above all on the practical implementation of its provisions. We stand ready to provide our full assistance and support in these painstaking efforts. Mr. President, we regret the fact that in recent years the Council is increasingly encountering the problem of the dilution of its agenda by its being suffused with matters unrelated to the mandate, specifically human rights, climate, and other matters. The sponsors of such initiatives continuously cloak themselves in noble intentions, and the victim of this practice is becoming the United Nations itself. Its feared presences are faced with secondary tasks, the achievement of which does not help to enhance stability, and at the same time, the views of the host states themselves are being disregarded. Ultimately, this merely escalates social grievances addressed to the United Nations, reducing its effectiveness and undermining its authority. As a result, many host states are increasingly actively striving to abandon such a presence. What is also noteworthy is the obstinate unwillingness of Western colleagues to conduct reviews of sanctions vis-à-vis countries where restrictive measures no longer reflect the current situation. The sanctions truncheon in the DPRK, Sudan, South Sudan, and the CAR is being leveraged by certain states as their lever of choice in external political pressure being brought to bear, and incidentally under the slogan of the UN. Despite evident signs that the pressing issues related to the imposition of sanctions having largely been resolved, our Western colleagues time and again continue to find more and more so-called incontrovertible evidence and arguments in order to keep them in effect unchanged. We note with regret that there is a shortage of an ability of the Council to engage in a constructive discussion and negotiations process. There remains a pressing matter of pen holdership. Pen holders, there are merely 3 delegations who continue to be pen holders on the majority of issues. And despite the fact that long ago they lost their status as colonial powers, they continue to proceed from the premise that they are exceptional, their exceptionalism casting themselves as mentors vis-a-vis other states and regions. Many host countries, regional players often have a better grasp of the situation on the ground, and the Secretariat is being disregarded completely, would remain a still relevant example of the abuse of the status of pen holdership is seen in the methodology for reaching agreement on Security Council resolutions. The work is frequently done with artificial timelines being looming overhead, which prevents the conduct of comprehensive expert-level discussions. As a result, they're openly raw, so to speak, documents which fail to take into account the key concerns of members of Security Council. They provide unclear instructions to the Secretariat and often are unrealistic in terms of aims and purposes. Russia continues to advocate for expansion of the pen holders, first and foremost to include non-permanent council members. In this respect, we trust that the discussion on this matter will continue at the Security Council Informal Working Group on Documentation. And at the same time, we pay particular attention to taking on board the views of African states. We advocate striking a balance between open and closed Security Council meetings. We see that some council members are blatantly abusing the open format of meetings in order to put on a show of propaganda, and at the same time, matters which are sensitive for them are matters which they prefer to discuss behind closed doors. We have seen evidence repeatedly of the excessive documentation of the Council. Annually, every year, the Security Council produces several hundred documents. The added value of some, alas, is dubious. And we believe that the outcomes of the Council need to be clear, concise, direct, and comprehensible, and most importantly, they need to be action-oriented. Next year, the Security Council will be faced with a very important duty to select a candidate for the post of the next Secretary General of the United Nations. Russia, as president in October of Security Council, promptly responded to the numerous calls from the international community and promptly started work for agreement to be reached on a joint letter of the presidents of the Security Council and General Assembly, strictly in line with existing practice. We trust that the document will be adopted in short time to formally start this important process. We trust that the efforts of the Security Council will help to facilitate the selection of the worthiest candidate for the future head of the Secretariat.
Too long, but I spoke on behalf of some 90 constituent subjects of the Russian Federation.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement. And I give the floor to the representative of China.
Thank you, President. First of all, I would like to thank Ambassador Larson, Ms. Sievers, and Ms. Kandia for their briefings. I thank non-council members for their attention to the topic and their active participation in today's meeting. The Charter of the United Nations entrusts the Security Council with the primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. The Council's working methods have never been just a technical matter. They are central to the effectiveness of the Council's work and to the role and authority of the UN. At present, unilateralism, power politics, and Cold War mentality are rampant, posing serious challenges to the multilateral system. It is imperative for the Security Council to revisit its founded mission, uphold sound principles, clarify directions for improvement, and strengthen unity and cooperation to inject greater stability and positive energy into a turbulent world. I would like to share the following observations. First, we should advocate consultation on an equal footing and build broad consensus. In recent years, the number of consensus consensus outcomes produced by the Council has dropped significantly, with many draft resolutions being forced to a vote despite substantial disagreements. This not only deepens internal divisions and contradictions within the Council, but also undermines the political weight and the effective authority of resolutions, making their subsequent implementation extremely difficult. Council members should respect and understand each other, listen to and accommodate each other's legitimate concerns, and strive wholeheartedly to reach consensus. While the process of consultation may be time-consuming and demand efforts, consensus outcomes can better withstand the test of history and reality. In this regard, the role of the penholder is particularly crucial. Serving as a penholder signifies responsibility, not privilege. It should be used to bridge differences and build consensus rather than prioritize national interests or misuse public resources for private gains. We must continuously refine the requirements for penholders to ensure that their powers operate transparently and are subject to the collective oversight of all Council members. Second, we should focus on core mandates and enhance quality, efficiency, and effectiveness. Taking the UN 80 reform as an opportunity, the Council should revisit the founding principles of the Charter, concentrate on its core mandates, and strengthen its leadership role in UN Pillar of Peace and Security. The Council should also start from small steps to overcome formalism and bureaucracy. We should streamline meeting schedules, timely adjust deliberation cycles in response to evolving situations on the ground, and reduce the frequency of discussions on broad agenda items that are repetitive or having little effect. We need to limit the duration of meetings and length of speeches and encourage like-minded countries to make joint statements. Avoid lengthy and vague outcome documents and enhance readability and operability of such documents. We should also flexibly determine formats of meetings based on actual needs, appropriately increase informal consultations, and promote frank and efficient communication among members. Third, we should insist on results-driven effort and pragmatic actions. The Security Council should comprehensively utilize all tools granted by the Charter to advance political solutions of hotspot issues. In accordance with Chapter 6 of the Charter, we should implement the spirit of Resolution 2788 and prioritize peaceful means such as dialogue, negotiation, good offices, and mediation to resolve disputes. Sanctions as a special tool granted to the Council under Chapter 7 of the Charter aim to create favorable conditions for political solutions and should not replace diplomatic efforts. The Council should handle sanctions with prudence and responsibility, adjusting or lifting them in a timely manner as circumstances evolve, and seek to mitigate their negative impacts on humanitarian situations and economic livelihoods. The Council should also, in line with the spirit of Chapter 8 of the Charter, support regional mechanisms such as the AU, ASEAN, the Arab League, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization in leveraging their unique strength to resolve regional issues through regional approaches. Fourth, we should exercise the veto power prudently and uphold fairness and justice. The veto system is a necessary arrangement to encourage coordination among major powers and prevent confrontation among them. It is a safety valve installed in the Security Council by the UN Charter. Historical practice shows that this system has generally fulfilled its intended purpose. However, in recent years, some country has disregarded the overwhelming voice of the international community and repeatedly abused its veto power on the Gaza issue, blocking Council actions and sparking significant controversy. China calls on the relevant country to heed the voice of the international community, earnestly shoulder its responsibility as a major power, and exercise its veto power prudently on the basis of respecting international law and upholding fairness and justice. President, as a permanent member, China has consistently participated in the work of the Council with a responsible attitude, supporting its role and upholding its authority. We stand ready to continue working with all parties to foster a spirit of solidarity and cooperation, explore effective ways to improve working methods, and enable the Council to better discharge its duties and play a constructive role in maintaining international peace and security. Thank you.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and many thanks to Sierra Leone for convening this important debate, and thank you to all of our briefers for their contributions to this debate. The United States welcomes this annual opportunity to hear the views of UN members about what aspects of the Council's working methods serve us well, and where members believe there are areas for improvement. Just last December, the Council updated Note 507. We would like to thank Japan for its leadership in facilitating this process, which resulted in a number of updates to this important guide and resource. The United States supports the continued use and implementation of the practices outlined in Note 507, which provides sufficiently clear guidelines for the work of the Council. It is vitally important that the Council's work, both substantive and procedural, serve the interests of all UN member states. In carrying out its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, as provided in Article 24 of the UN Charter, the Security Council is acting on behalf of all members of the United Nations. As we look ahead to the selection of the next Secretary General, the United States looks forward to a Secretary General who shares this vision of returning the UN to its founding purpose of maintaining international peace and security. We believe the process for the selection of such an important position should be purely merit-based, with a wide pool of candidates as possible. We therefore welcome candidates from all regional groupings. Finally, we would like to thank the Security Council Affairs Division and other members of the Secretariat for their continued operational legwork behind the scenes in support of the Council's work. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I wish to remind all speakers to limit their statement to not more than 3 minutes in order to enable the Council to carry out its work expeditiously. The flashing light on the microphone will prompt speakers to bring their remarks to a close after 3 minutes. And I'll give the floor to the representative of Kazakhstan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Amid growing global challenges and shifting geopolitical dynamics, the working methods of the Security Council remain a valuable platform for constructive dialogue and pragmatic progress. We thank Sierra Leone for convening this debate, and Denmark and Pakistan for their leadership of the informal working group on documentation and other procedural questions. We also value the insight shared by today's briefers, who are well-known experts on the Security Council working methods. The credibility of the Council depends not only on the substance of its decisions, but also on the integrity and inclusiveness of the process through which they are made. Transparent and accountable working methods are the foundation of trust within the Council and the wider UN membership. These priorities reflect the vision of my president, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, who at the 8th session of the General Assembly emphasized that the reform of the United Nations is a strategic necessity to restore trust, inclusivity, and effectiveness in multilateralism. Kazakhstan welcomes the adoption of the updated Note 507 and supports its consistent and balanced implementation. We advocate a fair and transparent approach to penholdership and co-penholdership, as well as a balanced distribution of responsibilities in chairing subsidiary bodies, ensuring meaningful participation of elected members, and a true sense of shared ownership. Strengthening the security development nexus remains essential, as lasting peace is impossible without social and economic progress. Close engagement and burden sharing between the Security Council, ECOSOC, and other UN bodies, combined with the revitalization of visiting Security Council missions and enhanced cooperation with regional organizations, would help ensure more coherent, informed, and context-sensitive decision-making across the UN system. Now, taking this opportunity, I would like to draw your attention to an issue which is not of controversial character, but rather helps to raise the dignity of the Security Council. Many of you have taken part in the flag installation ceremony for newly elected non-permanent members and have witnessed how meaningful this moment can be, especially for those joining the Council for the first time. We are going to have another one on January 2nd, 2026, for the next incoming member states of the Security Council, together with the President of the Security Council for January, Somalia. The dignified and symbolic tradition now cherished and supported by member states requires no additional resources and yet it carries deep significance. It highlights the unity and cooperation that underpin the Security Council's work and provides an opportunity to honor the newly elected members as they assume the solemn responsibility of maintaining international peace and security, one of the highest mandates entrusted by the United Nations. For elected members, this moment is more than a ceremony. It is a recognition of the trust placed in them by the international community and the reminder that their voice and vision enrich the Council's deliberations. It also symbolizes continuity, mutual respect, and shared responsibility, reminding us that beyond political differences, the Security Council remains one body united in purpose and guided by the enduring principles of the UN Charter. To preserve this positive practice and the spirit of collegiality it fosters, it would be both fitting and practical to reflect the flag installation ceremony within Note 507. Recognizing it as part of the Council's working methods would correspond to the significance of this moment, institutionalize the ceremony, and provide unique opportunity for participants to present their vision and priorities of their membership to a broader audience. Kazakhstan, as the initiator of the ceremony in 2018, is ready to cooperate with the working group on this matter and will appreciate the follow-up. Since this issue is not of a political nature, but rather a procedural one, we hope that we will be able to put the necessary language in the Note 507 before January event. If not, then of course Kazakhstan will continue initiating it on itself. Mr. President, at the end, Kazakhstan reaffirms its unwavering commitment to a more transparent, effective, and representative Security Council, one that is guided by dialogue, inclusivity, and the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Kazakhstan for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Egypt.
أخي السفير مايكل كان. Your Excellency Ambassador Michael Kanu, Permanent Representative of Sierra Leone, at the outset I would like to congratulate you on assuming the presidency of the Council for the month of November, commend you for convening this open debate on one of the key issues governing the Security Council work. Holding such a meeting is in itself a practical application of how to improve the Council's working methods and strengthen its engagement with the wider UN membership. I would like also to thank the briefers for their valuable insights. In this context, I would like to highlight the following points. Egypt welcomes the points contained in document 5 in S/2024/507, as well as the proposals and views that may contribute to enhancing Council's efficiency and improving its working methods. Second, we also welcome the monthly meetings held by successive Security Council presidencies, whether at the beginning of their presidency to present their program of work or at the end to review what was accomplished. We call on Council members to continue this positive practice, and we further call on the chairs of subsidiary bodies to intensify their consultations with the wider membership, particularly with those countries concerned with the work of those committees. Third, we welcome the increased frequency of open meetings in the Security Council and call for maintaining and strengthening this practice, whether in Council meetings or within its subsidiary bodies and sanctions committees. We must not forget that the Security Council represents the general membership, and therefore, as a general rule, its meetings and activities should not be shielded away from the wider membership. Fourth, Council members should make more efforts to reach the necessary agreements on the chairmanships of subsidiary bodies. Delays in reaching such agreements neither serve the Council nor the wider membership, and they hinder the Council's ability to fulfill its mandate as expected. We hope the Council will not witness such delays again. Fifth, it is necessary to provide the wider membership with draft resolutions and presidential statements under consideration by the Security Council through consistent and formal mechanisms that are easily accessible to all, to keep also member states informed of developments in related consultations. The wider membership should also, to the greatest extent possible, be given the opportunity to convey their views and proposals on those drafts to Security Council members. Written texts of briefings delivered in the Council, as well as the statements of member states, should additionally be made available on the Council's website or through the UN Journal, similar to the practice followed by the General Assembly. 6. It is important for the Security Council to consult with regional and sub-regional organizations relevant to the situations under its consideration, including its subsidiary bodies and committees, especially the African Union and the League of Arab States. 7th, while acknowledging progress related to the issue of penholdership, we believe that further development is needed, including the rotation of penholder role among all Council members. It is unreasonable and unacceptable that just few permanent members continue to monopolize penholdership on certain files indefinitely. This responsibility should instead be rotated among permanent and elected members alike in a manner that enriches the Council's work and benefits from the diverse expertise of member states. Mr. President, there is no shortage of proposals to improve the working methods of the Security Council, its subsidiary organs, and its Sections Committee. What truly matters is the political will to adopt these proposals and a genuine conviction that improving working methods will enhance the added value of the Council and its subsidiary bodies and will strengthen their credibility before the wider membership. It is also conceivable that while the dominant and general mood and conversation across the organization is one of reform, especially in the context of UN80 initiative, the Security Council remains resistant to reform, despite mounting evidence that the Council is in urgent need of comprehensive reform across all its structures and functions. Accordingly, we reiterate our call for reforming the Council through the IGN process in a manner that expands its membership in both categories, grants Africa 2 permanent seats with veto power and 2 additional non-permanent seats, and provides the Arab group with permanent representation commensurate with the prominence of its issues on the Council's agenda. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Egypt for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Chile.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. We'd like to thank Sierra Leone for convening this debate. We recognize the leadership of the co-chairs of the Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions, and we're grateful to the briefers for their insightful briefings this morning. President, Chile believes that improving the Council's methods of work is not an administrative exercise. It is an opportunity to bring this body closer to the values that provide it with legitimacy, trust, consistency, and accountability. That is the only way for us to meet the expectations of the peoples in the United Nations. The implementation of Note 507 has been an important step forward towards a more transparent and inclusive Council. But there remain gaps that we must address decisively, strengthening predictability in the rotation of responsibilities, broadening access to information on internal procedures, and ensuring more effective participation of states who are not members of the Council. These are all specific measures to bring about a more open, legitimate, and representative Council. We think that the Council should assess more systematically the impact of its decisions and resolutions by undertaking a structured dialogue with the countries affected and with the other bodies in the organization. Learning from lessons, identifying challenges, and correcting mistakes will strengthen the consistency of our work and help to close divisions that exist within the Council. On the appointment of chairs and vice chairs of the subsidiary bodies, the delays that we've seen this year highlight the need for a more transparent, equitable, and timely procedure. The distribution of responsibilities should reflect geographic diversity and political diversity, and it must guarantee institutional continuity. In addition to this, Rule 37 should be applied consistently, clearly, and in a non-restrictive way, ensuring the meaningful participation of states directly affected by items on the Council's agenda. President, a more smooth cooperation between the Council, the General Assembly, and ECOSOC is also critical to guarantee consistent decisions in the domain of peace, development and human rights. Transparency should not be an isolated principle, it should be a cross-cutting practice throughout the entire multilateral system. As we look towards the election of the next SG next year, we are in favour of an open, participatory and gender-inclusive process. After 80 years, the time has come for a woman to lead this organisation. A woman who, with her leadership and vision, can provide the multilateral system with the credibility that it needs to respond to the challenges of our time. The principle of regional rotation should be respected as well, and it is the turn of the region of Latin America and the Caribbean to lead this post, and that was what was recently expressed at the ECLAC summit. Lastly, President, Chile reaffirms its commitment to a more representative, effective and transparent council, acting on behalf of all member states, being accountable and able to bring about unity even in adversity. Only in that way can this body fulfill the mandate that the Charter has given it, to uphold international peace and security on the basis of dialogue, equity and cooperation. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Chile for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Portugal aligns itself with the ACT Group and wishes to thank Denmark and Pakistan in their capacity as co-chairs of the Informal Working Group for their leadership on this topic. We also express our appreciation to the briefers, Ms. Lorraine Sievers and Ms. Shamala Kandia, for their insightful contributions, particularly on the participation, meeting formats and lessons from past practice. We would like to add 6 points in our national capacity. First, we welcome the progress achieved over the past year, notably the adoption of the expanded Note 507, which reflects the Council's sustained efforts to update and refine its working methods. As highlighted today, this is not a one-off exercise, but a continuous process. The note provides a strong framework to enhance transparency, inclusivity, and efficiency. We do support its full and consistent implementation. Second, on subsidiary bodies, Portugal recognized the complexity of the appointment process and the genuine efforts of Council members to reach timely agreement. Building on the constructive ideas mentioned today, we believe that pragmatic safeguards, such as allowing outgoing chairs and vice chairs to temporarily continue their functions where needed, can help ensure continuity. These measures could be practical tools to preserve institutional stability. Third, on participation, Portugal values the thoughtful reflections shared by Ms. Sievers on the application of Rule 37, which governs the participation of non-council members whose interests are deemed to be specially affected by a situation under consideration. We agree this is an area where greater clarity can enhance confidence and prevent misunderstandings. Developing more consistent practice while preserving the Council's flexibility would help ensure meaningful participation of specially affected states and strengthening the Council relationship with the wider membership. Fourth, Portugal places great emphasis on reinforcing the links between the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Peace-Building Commission, and troop and police contributing countries. As highlighted by both briefers, strengthening interactions through more systematic consultations, timely dialogue before mandate renewals, and better use of informal formats can help build trust and improve the effectiveness of the Council decisions. We strongly support exploring these practical avenues, especially at a time of broader reflection on peacekeeping and ahead of UN80. Fifth, the selection and appointment of the next Secretary General will be a significant moment for the credibility of the organization in 2026. Portugal supports the call to codify a clearer and more inclusive process, aligned with the latest resolution on GI revitalization and informed by lessons from 2015 and 2016. We also concur with today's suggestions that preserving relevant documents and modalities would greatly assist incoming elected members as they prepare for this responsibility. the timely issuance of the joint letter launching the process will also be important. Sixth and last, Portugal attaches importance to transparency and accountability regarding the use of the veto. Without prejudging its exercise, we consider that the Security Council annual report should systematically reference the special reports triggered by vetoes and the related debates in the General Assembly. This would improve the coherence of the report cycle and provide a fuller picture to the wider membership. Mr. President, in closing, today's debate has shown that working methods are not a technical sidebar, but a central element of the Council's credibility and its capacity to deliver. Portugal welcomes the intention of the co-chairs of the informal working group to follow up on these ideas shared today. As we mark 80 years of the United Nations, Portugal believes that the Council's legitimacy will continue to depend not only on the decision it adopts, but also on how it conducts its work. Fully implementing and gradually improving Note 507 is one of the most concrete ways to strengthen this institution. Finally, allow me to underline that Portugal will continue to contribute to this effort with the same spirit of cooperation and responsibility, values we intend to bring should we have the honor of serving on the Council in the years ahead. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Portugal for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Singapore.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for convening this timely and important discussion. We commend the co-chairs of the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions, Denmark and Pakistan, for taking up the important work of promoting transparency and accountability of the Council. I also thank the briefers from the Security Council report and the Security Council procedure for their insightful opening remarks. We welcome the E10 statement on working methods that was made by the Ambassador of Pakistan earlier. We share their views on this issue and would like to offer some additional perspectives. First, the Council's working methods are fundamentally about ensuring transparency. Transparency is the foundation for a credible, effective, and accountable Security Council. Transparency has a positive impact, not just on the work of the Council and the implementation of the Council's decisions. It will also promote greater dialogue and transparency beyond the Council in the broader peace and security domain. In this regard, while we commend the increase in the number of open meetings of the Council, we continue to observe that closed consultations remain a regular practice for certain files. While we understand that closed discussions may be necessary for more candid exchanges between Council members, we think that more efforts should be made to convene some of these meetings in an open format, allowing for the participation especially of concerned member states. At a minimum, some form of summary record, at least on decision points, should be produced for closed meetings and shared with the wider membership. Second, we want to see a more inclusive and consultative Council. We are encouraged that Council members have made greater use of formats such as area formula meetings to engage with the General Assembly. We also appreciate the regular wrap-up meetings with the wider membership by the presidency of each month and hope that these will progress towards more interactive discussions and analysis instead of being yet another occasion to deliver prepared statements. In this connection, the report of the Security Council to the General Assembly is important for accountability between the Council and the wider membership. For all member states to have a considered debate on the work of the Council, these reports should be made available to members early. Singapore strongly supports the suggestion in paragraph 148 of Note 507 for interactive, informal exchanges of views with the wider membership when the annual report is being drafted. We also note that paragraph 157 of Note 507 encourages the President of the Council, in charge of presenting the report to the General Assembly, to report to the Council members on relevant suggestions and observations raised during the debate. It is important that the Council convene soon after the General Assembly debate to reflect on these suggestions and observations. Mr. President, we also call on all Council Presidents to submit their monthly assessment pursuant to paragraph 155 of Note 507, as these provide an important flow of information from the Council to the General Assembly. In 2024, we note that just 8 of 12 council presidents submitted their monthly assessments. Just 8 of 12. There should be more consistent and coordinated efforts from the council in this regard. We hope that there will be progress on this particular issue, because this is an issue that my delegation has raised repeatedly, both here and in the General Assembly. My third and final point is about effectiveness. The Council's record on this remains mixed, with swift decisions being taken on some issues, but a lack of adequate action on other issues. For example, the delay in the appointment of the chairs of subsidiary bodies until June this year was a severe setback to the implementation of Council decisions. We call on Council members to adhere to the guidelines for the selection of chairs of subsidiary bodies contained in Note 507 and to avoid the politicization of this process. More significantly, the indiscriminate use of the veto has continued to affect the Council, preventing it from acting in a timely and appropriate manner. It's especially disheartening to note that since the veto initiative resolution was adopted in the General Assembly in April 22, there have been 17 vetoes. Mr. President, the P5 have special privileges, and these must accordingly be wielded with special responsibility and special care. Our view is that the updated note on the Council's working methods should clearly articulate the UN membership's expectation for Council members to act in unity to discharge their responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. We believe that Council members, particularly the permanent members, should abstain from voting if they are party to a dispute in line with Article 27.3 of the UN Charter. Singapore also supports the French-Mexican initiative and the ACT's Code of Conduct on limiting the use of the veto against mass atrocities. Mr. President, allow me to conclude by thanking the co-chairs for their continued efforts on this issue. At a time when we are seeking to reform the UN system to make it more effective and fit for purpose, it behooves the Council to undertake practical reforms to the same end. We call on all Council members, particularly the permanent members, to engage constructively in this initiative to improve the working methods of the Council. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Singapore for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Indonesia.
Mr. President, I thank Sierra Leone for convening this meeting and also the briefers for their valuable insights. Indonesia welcomes the convening of this open debate as an opportunity for a strategic assessment of the Council's working method. Indonesia wishes to see a Council that is fit for the future in addressing today's and tomorrow's challenging environment. We believe that this is critical to safeguard the Council's credibility and legitimacy. Doing so will allow the Council to fulfill its primary mandate of maintaining international peace and security. Mr. President, against this backdrop, allow me to highlight 3 points. First, improving the Council's working method must be part of the wider UN reform. The Council must strengthen its coordination with the General Assembly, ECOSOC, and Peacebuilding Commission. At the same time, Note 507 must contribute to the discussion of the Council's working method in the ongoing intergovernmental negotiation process. Second, improving the Council's working method is not just a technical exercise, but a political imperative. Our efforts must be guided by the core principles of multilateralism, namely transparency, accountability, and meaningful participation of the wider UN membership. It is also critical to deepen cooperation with regional organizations in the Council's work, including by inviting them as briefers. Third, we must refrain from politicizing procedural matters. The Council needs to review the appointment mechanism for chairs of subsidiary bodies to ensure their timely designation. Likewise, the Council needs to also improve the process for selecting penholders to avoid delays in the Council's work. Failure to resolve even procedural matters would raise serious questions about the Council's ability to carry out its mandate and to respond effectively to situations on the ground. Mr. President, the adoption of the updated Note 507 is a step in the right direction towards a Council that is more effective, democratic, transparent, and representative. Rest assured of Indonesia's commitment to this endeavor. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Indonesia for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Liechtenstein.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening us today for this open debate, and to the briefers for their insightful presentations. Liechtenstein aligns with the ACT statement to be delivered by Switzerland later today. President, Liechtenstein has long taken an interest in the working methods of the Security Council, given that, according to the Charter, the Council works on behalf of the membership. We have not only a moral, but a legal interest in the Council being able to fulfill its primary responsibility for peace and security. The Council's commitments to its methods of work must befit the life and death consequences of the products it adopts. President, Liechtenstein is grateful that there have been fewer vetoes so far this year than in 2024. Of course, this does not mean that the Council has been able to act in relevant situations. To cite one recent example, the Council has been unable to even table a text in response to apparent atrocities unfolding in Darfur, 20 years after we said never again. In this respect, we note that the 8 Council members who are amongst the 130 signatories to the ACT Code of Conduct have pledged to support timely and decisive action to prevent and end atrocity crimes. And in this summer's resolution on the revitalization of the General Assembly, all Council members decided to support credible, timely and decisive action by the Security Council in exercise of its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, and to refrain from measures impeding action to prevent and end the commission of genocide, crimes against humanity, or war crimes. In Ukraine, the Council in February watered down the calls of the membership in the General Assembly to hold Russia accountable for its aggression. To do this, the Council relied on vetoes by the Russian Federation of amendments put forward by European member states. According to the Charter, the Russian Federation, as a party to the dispute in the situation in Ukraine, should not have voted on this resolution or its amendments. We encourage all Council members to clarify their approach to the application of the relevant part of Charter Article 27.3, as was agreed in the Pact for the Future. President, the Council should also at this point have kick-started the process, together with the President of the General Assembly, for the selection and appointment of the Secretary-General by adopting the joint letter. While the Secretary-General is appointed by the General Assembly, the Security Council has an important role to play by making its recommendation to the GA. As is reflected in this year's General Assembly Revitalization Resolution, the process should be guided by the principles of transparency, accountability, and inclusivity. We look forward to a productive process at this vital time for the UN and encourage the Council to codify its role in the process through discussions in the informal working group. President, the UNAT reform process will affect the work of all parts of the UN, the Security Council being no exception. In particular, the ambit of the informal ad hoc working group on UNAT, covering Workstream 2, includes the mandates created by the Council. There are perhaps lessons for the membership as a whole in the practice of the Council. For example, the clear sunset provisions of most Council mandates, as well as its efficient termination of mandates. That being said, as a whole, the Council is clearly not living up to its own Charter mandate put forward in Article 24. While Member States must ensure that the UN's money is spent wisely, we must also ensure that in doing so, we are fulfilling our treaty obligations. We look forward to discussing these issues further under the leadership of New Zealand and Jamaica. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Liechtenstein for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Latvia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would first like to thank the Presidency and the outstanding briefers, Ms. Lauren Sievers and Ms. Shamala Kandia-Thompson, for their valuable insights and continued focus on strengthening the Security Council's working methods. Latvia also expresses its appreciation to Denmark and Pakistan, the co-chairs of the informal working group on documentation and other procedural questions, for leadership in advancing discussions that enhance the Council's transparency and efficiency. Your efforts contribute to making Council's work more predictable and accountable, which we all benefit from. We particularly commend the co-chairs for the dedicated and constructive facilitation of the process for selecting chairs for the subsidiary bodies in 2026. We trust that the subsequent process will allow for its smooth and timely completion so the subsidiary bodies can commence their important work without delay and continue to contribute effectively to the Council's mandate. I would like now to address a few further points. First, we believe that transparency in the Council's practice directly enhances its credibility. Consistent application of the provisional rules of procedure and working methods is fundamental to maintaining confidence in the Council's ability to fulfill its mandate. In this regard, Latvia underlines the importance of a fair, predictable and consistent application of Rule 37 in order to ensure that all member states that all member states directly affected by the Council's deliberations can participate in the discussion and contribute with their valuable perspectives. At the same time, we recognize that the Council must find a fine balance between closed consultations, which facilitate efficient decision-making, and the openness of public meetings, where transparency and trust walk hand in hand. Second, Latvia stresses that effective participation of all 15 Council members must be ensured in both substance and process. Timely and fully inclusive circulation of documentation to all members enables that all Council members can engage in discussions constructively. We therefore encourage all presidencies and respective penholders to circulate such documents in a transparent and timely manner, consistent with the practice outlined in the Note 507. And we further affirm our commitment to uphold these principles during our forthcoming tenure on the Council. Third, the Council's working methods should be further improved during the upcoming Secretary-General selection process. This could be achieved through a closer cooperation with the General Assembly by providing regular procedural updates to the wider UN membership. Latvia advocates for the timely and consistent distribution of all relevant communication, including documents related to the selection process itself. And this approach would be visibly reaffirming the Council's commitment to Article 24 of the UN Charter. Latvia further underscores the importance of promoting gender equality and geographical balance in the nomination and evaluation of the Secretary-General candidates. The inclusion of women in leadership and equitable regional representation strengthens both the legitimacy and credibility of the United Nations in the eyes of its wider membership and the public. In conclusion, Latvia affirms its commitment to supporting practical improvements that make the Security Council more accountable, effective and representative. Its procedures must embody the principles of fairness and shared responsibility upon which the United Nations is built. And Latvia will work with all Council members to achieve that goal. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Latvia for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Germany.
President, thank you very much for this open debate today, and thank you to both co-chairs for the informal working group for their valuable work. And I would also like to thank the speakers and especially Ms. Sievers and Ms. Candia Thompson for their insightful briefings. Mr. President, Germany has long called for a comprehensive reform of the Security Council for it to reflect the realities of the 21st century. Underrepresented regions and countries significantly contributing to global peace and security need stronger representation in both permanent and non-permanent membership categories. And the other part is, of course, the working methods, which must be made for purpose, because the membership of the United Nations, and that is to say, our people in all countries rightfully expect that the Council delivers solutions to the issues on its agenda. And I want to make 4 brief points. First, on penholdership. If we look at the changing world, it's increasingly hard to understand why the lead of most files on the Council's agenda is concentrated in the hands of only a few members. Countries from conflict regions, or those who actively contribute to solving conflicts, should be able to act as co-penholders more frequently. This is possible, and it has been done in the past, and Germany was proud to act as the first non-P5 co-penholder in the Council during our last Security Council tenure, where we cooperated closely with the United Kingdom in sharing the pen on Libya sanctions and Darfur. Secondly, on cooperation among elected members, the diversity of the E10, in our view, is a valuable asset, and if fully harnessed, it can greatly enhance the Council's performance. When united, the E10 are more powerful, and recently the E10 have proven their ability to find solutions when the humanitarian situation in the Middle East gridlocked the P5. And the E10 could further improve their cooperation and present their own drafts. Consultations between incoming and incumbent E10 could also help to define common priorities and pave the way for smooth cooperation and transition of membership. Thirdly, on UN system coherence, the Security Council should systematically draw on the expertise of other UN bodies. And from our experience as chair of the Peacebuilding Commission and as the biggest long-term donor of the Peacebuilding Fund, the UN peacebuilding architecture has great potential and is extremely valuable, particularly in post-conflict settings. And this is is evident in many cases, and it is becoming more evident as peacekeeping missions mandated by the Council are drawing down. And we have successful examples like Liberia and Sierra Leone that show how transitions benefit from a close cooperation between the Council and peacebuilding institutions. And finally, on the use of the veto, let's be clear, the veto has been misused in the past, and using the veto clearly and mainly to advance national interests undermines the credibility and effectiveness of the Council. And the use of the veto is particularly unacceptable when a permanent member itself has initiated a conflict and is part of a conflict. So Germany welcomes efforts to limit its use, in particular in cases of genocide, in cases of crimes against humanity and war crimes on a large scale. Because when countless lives are at risk, there should be no right to veto. So, Mr. President, in closing, let me say transparency, efficiency, and accountability are not merely nice words or elusive goals to strive for the Council, but they are
The implementation of Note 507 should be more transparent so that we encourage members of the Council to implement it consistently. The report of the Council to the Assembly should also contain an analysis of the Council's work, including the challenges that it has faced. We support strengthening cooperation between these two bodies of the United Nations in line with the annual resolution on the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly, and this also applies to the Peacebuilding Commission. We think there is room for a more equitable distribution of work between the members of the Council, particularly on the distribution of resolution drafting. Note 507 recognizes that members with experience on items on the agenda can provide added value when they take on the role for drafting documents. We need to improve access to documentation and information on the work of the Council. When we were President of the Council in 2015, we introduced the so-called Toledo formula in the closing briefings at the end of the presidencies of the Council. These meetings, under the so-called Toledo formula, were more than just a summary of the Council's work during a particular month, but there was a question and answer session with the permanent members and comments from members on what had been achieved during the month. We urge all member states to join the French-Mexican initiative, which advocates refraining from using the veto in cases of mass atrocities, such as genocide, crimes against humanity, and wide-scale war crimes. We should include the initiatives that includes the ACT Code of Conduct into the Council's Rules of Procedure, and we underscore that Article 27.3 of the Charter affects and applies to all members of the Council. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Spain for the statement. and I give the floor to the representative of Estonia.
Thank you, President. I welcome today's timely discussion on the working methods of a Security Council. I thank the distinguished briefers for their most valuable contributions and commend Denmark and Pakistan for taking stewardship of the informal working group on documentation and other procedural questions. Estonia aligns itself with a statement to be delivered by Switzerland on behalf of Accountability, Coherence and Transparency Group, ACT Group. Estonia considers it crucial to keep updating Note 507 and would like to raise some key elements that we deem necessary to enhance the efficiency, transparency and accountability of the Security Council. First, ending and preventing genocide, crimes against humanity and war crimes are the key responsibilities of the Security Council. And unfortunately, on too many occasions, the Security Council has failed to live up to this task. A large contributor to the inaction of the Security Council has been the misuse of the right to veto. Estonia insists on refraining from voting against resolutions aimed at ending mass atrocities, including the crime of aggression. We also reiterate our call for the full application of Article 27(3) of the Charter and its obligatory provision to abstain in cases where members themselves are party to a dispute. There is still no mention of this obligation in Note 507. Why? We believe it should be reflected there. Second, we call for enhanced transparency and inclusivity in the selection process of the Secretary General. While the General Assembly Revitalization Resolution lays out a broad timeline for the process, we really need a clear indication of when key decisions are made in the Security Council, as well as a deadline for the Security Council recommendation to the General Assembly. The Assembly should not be rushed with the appointment, and equally, the next Secretary General needs sufficient time to prepare for the office. We also recommend that the Security Council nominate more than one candidate. This would enhance the complementarity roles assigned to both forums in the Charter. Third, we oppose the use of the Council's platform to promote imperial, colonialist and malicious goals and to spread lies in support of war of aggression. This is contrary to the Charter of the United Nations, and this undermines the credibility of the Council, which is supposed to stand for a value-based world. And lastly, we encourage to continue and strengthen the practice of inviting relevant and competent, I underline, relevant and competent civil society briefers, including women and youth representatives, to help enrich the Council's discussions. Chair, as effective and accountable Security Council that is able to solve conflicts, build consensus and take action is an absolute requirement. And I trust that the Council will work to implement the improvements presented today on their working methods. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Estonia for the statement. I wish to welcome to the Council, and I give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Andreas Motzfeldt-Kravik, State Secretary for the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Norway.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Nordic countries, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Sweden, and my own country, Norway. And let me preface my remarks by thanking our two learned speakers, Lorraine Sievers and Shamala Thompson from the Security Council report for two very insightful briefings. We all have a responsibility as UN members to examine how the Council is functioning, to check what is and isn't working, and to propose solutions. So we welcome this opportunity to engage today. Mr. President, we appreciate the Council's efforts to consolidate and update Note 507, and we congratulate Japan for their steady hand and patient work. We welcome updates including on mitigating risks and threats of reprisals against civil society briefers who enriched the deliberations of this body. We note with concern that consensus was not reached on incorporating all agreements on working methods per the usual practice, as well as the backsliding on commitments to transparency through press elements, monthly working methods committees, and the establishment of a live list of co-sponsors for draft resolutions. Mr. President, we highlight too that the GA has now updated its rules of procedures to reflect gender-specific nouns for women and not only men. We hope the Council will build on discussions held in the context of the update of Note 507 and soon to do the same. Mr. President, the Nordic countries remain deeply concerned by the unprecedented situation last year where some of the most operational work of the Council remained dormant for 5 months due to the inability to reach a political decision on the distribution of subsidiary body chairs. This sends the wrong signal about the effectiveness and legitimacy of the Council. A signal reinforced by the continual lack of agreement this year, well past the Council's own 1st October timeline. This disproportionality impacts incoming members, disproportionately rather. Elected members should shoulder the burden of chairing subsidiary bodies, and a late distribution leaves them in insufficient time to prepare to play a full and active role. The stopgap measures outlined in Note 507 can be improved to ensure continuity, for example, through the greater involvement of vice chairs and greater clarity on how the presidency should act as acting chair. But ultimately, we urge the Council to finalize an agreement without delay. Mr. President, the Nordic countries are looking ahead to the process of the selection and appointment of the next Secretary General. We urge the Council, including the P5, to uphold the highest standards of transparency and inclusivity in this process. We look forward to the speedy issuance of a genuinely joint letter from the Presidents of the Council and the General Assembly to begin the process and demonstrate shared and equal ownership. The informal interactive dialogues in the General Assembly with candidates, with the involvement of civil society, have been instrumental to improve transparency and inclusivity and must be safeguarded. And we strongly encourage the Council to increase the transparency of its own deliberative process. White smoke, so to speak, is not enough. This is a matter of credibility. Candidates deserve to hear results from the Council directly, as do all members of the GA, as is the General Assembly, who ultimately decides on the appointment of the Secretary General. We emphasize, too, the importance of the considerations of geography and gender in the selection and appointment of the next SG, and strongly encourage women candidates. Finally, Mr. President, the Nordic countries consider these as only some of the steps needed to ensure this Council is accountable, transparent, and has the legitimacy and buy-in from the broader membership and also the broader public to contribute to the maintenance of international peace and security for another 80 years and beyond. And I thank you.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Kravik, for the statement. And I'll give the floor to the representative of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Philippines thanks Sierra Leone for convening this open debate, and Denmark and Pakistan for their leadership as co-chairs of the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions. We also thank the briefers for their valuable insights. The Philippines believes that effective working methods are vital to maintaining confidence in the Council's ability to discharge its responsibility under Article 24 of the UN Charter. We wish to share 5 recommendations to help strengthen the Council's efficiency, transparency, inclusivity, accountability, and working culture. First, on efficiency, the Council may wish to consider establishing clearer timelines for the selection of chairs and vice chairs of subsidiary bodies, with periodic updates through the Informal Working Group. Where delays may occur, outgoing chairs could continue provisionally to ensure better continuity. The Council may also consider providing sufficient time notice and structured follow-up for urgent meetings to allow members adequate time to prepare and consult their capitals. Second, on transparency, the Philippines appreciates the Council's regular debriefings with non-Council members after closed consultations and encourages their continuation. We also support maintaining an updated list of pen holders and early circulation of draft text to all Council members. Third, Mr. President, on inclusivity, we encourage a more consistent and transparent application of Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure to enable the participation of concerned member states in meetings and its deliberations. Fourth, on accountability, the Philippines supports the public release of the Informal Working Group's performance indicators so that all member states can follow the Council's implementation of Note 507. Greater transparency in the use of the veto, including follow-up discussions after General Assembly consideration, would further enhance the Council's credibility and responsiveness. Finally, on working culture, the forthcoming selection of the next Secretary General presents a good opportunity for the Council to demonstrate even greater transparency and inclusivity, including early publication of the timeline and consideration of qualified women candidates. Mr. President, in conclusion, reforming the Council's working methods is not only a matter of procedure, but also an important means of strengthening its legitimacy and credibility. As a candidate for the 2027-2028 term, the Philippines reaffirms its strong commitment to a transparent, accountable, and representative Security Council that acts decisively and consults inclusively on behalf of all member states. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Philippines for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for convening this open debate on the implementation of Note 507. You know how much passion Japan has on this agenda, and we also really appreciate the variable inputs from today's briefers. As prescribed in paragraph 111 of the note, the members of the Council are committed to holding an annual open debate on Security Council's working methods, and we welcome today's session in this regard. Japan views that the annual debate serves an important opportunity for member states to propose ways to improve the Council's working method, which can be considered by the Council members in their work. Japan would also like to extend its gratitude to Denmark and Pakistan for co-chairing the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions, IWG. As a country that has served as the IWG chair 4 times, including last year, we are fully aware of how difficult it is to gather thoughts on developing the working methods of the Council. So let me congratulate them for their dedicated efforts. Mr. President, improving the Security Council's working method is a matter directly linked to the Council's mandate of maintaining international peace and security, and the Council should therefore strive to establish more efficient and transparent rules. Japan therefore is proud of its work to have developed the new Note 507. I am confident that the latest update of Note 507 fairly reflects the established practices for facilitating smooth daily business in the Council. I am delighted the Council members are now making use of the latest edition of the Handbook on the Working Methods of the Security Council, the so-called Green Book, which my mission published this past March and distributed to all the member states that requested copies. Based on the achievement we made last year, Council is expected to implement the note. Unfortunately, the fact that the chairs of the subsidiary bodies could not be decided on until June this year is proof that the agreements stipulated in the note have not been fully respected. We strongly hope the agreement on which the Council members will chair the subsidiary bodies for the next year will be reached as soon as possible. If and when cases arise where the text of the note does not provide appropriate guidance, the Council should seek new arrangements. For instance, Japan understands that Council members are discussing matters regarding the participation of non-Council members under Rule 37. This rule concerns all member states, and Japan expects discussions to continue to ensure fair and equitable participation. Mr. President, with the election of the Secretary General scheduled for next year, clarifying the selection process within the Security Council has become a matter of great interest, not only for member states, but for the international community. In this regard, Japan would like to emphasize the importance of further efforts by the Council to achieve a more transparent process than ever before, adhering to the resolution on the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly adopted this September. Japan would also like to strongly recommend the current and incoming Council members refer to the identical letter issued by Ambassador Besho Koro, Japan's permanent representative at the time, which shares the lessons learned from his experience serving as a president of the Council in July 2016, when the process of selecting the next Secretary General last took place. I believe this insightful letter will serve as a good basis for discussions in the Council to further enhance transparency, inclusivity, and predictability of the process. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Romania.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I also would like to thank the briefers as they provided not only with the historical background and the relevance of the working methods of this body, but they also provided recommendations and solutions on how to overcome problems such as the Council operating without appointing chairs of subsidiary bodies, which is an experience that we deem to remain unique. The previous debate on the working methods, about 18 months ago in March 24, I emphasized 3 points that I think are still valid today. The first one is the need for an increased dialogue between the Security Council and the General Assembly, the relevance of the Security Council field trips, and the third one, a wide range of voices in the Council meetings that need to be heard. On the increased dialogue between the Security Council and the General Assembly, the upcoming months, I think, are critical with the election of the new Secretary General, which is going to be high on the agenda. And the first test, I think, is the joint letter that the President of the General Assembly and the President of the Security Council will need to issue in order to initiate formally the process of the selection. The conversations we had in the wider membership in the context of the negotiations on the new revitalization resolution have demonstrated the importance and the increased interest for further advancing interinstitutional cooperation. The partnership between the General Assembly and the Security Council is essential on a number of topics, particularly on the maintenance of international peace and security and on the selection of the Secretary General. And I would see this relationship as a complementarity. It is not a competition, it is not something that undermines the confidence, but it's exactly the opposite. We agreed together recently to commit to more openness and transparency in the work of the Security Council, as enshrined in Article 24(1) of the UN Charter, and we trust the new commitments for consolidating interaction and collaboration between the two main organs will reflect the potential the UN has when it works in complementarity rather than in silos, at a time when it is more important than ever that we deliver together and we restore trust in the overall multilateral architecture. On the relevance of the Council field trips, we welcome the revival of this tradition despite financial constraints. We think that these field trips are very much important. If mandates, including Security Council mandates, are to be reviewed, of course, members of the Security Council need first-hand information before making a decision. We very much welcome, from this point of view, the preparations for the upcoming visit in the Middle East in the next few weeks. Mr. President, the primary responsibility of the Council is the maintenance of international peace and security. And however, wide interest from non-Council members and other actors to attend Council meetings should be viewed as a positive sign of the authority of this body. Exactly as my own delegation requests regularly to speak in the Council under Rule 77 or 39, I think it's important to allow member states to express their views on such important issues. And that's why Rules 37 and 39 of the Provisional Rules of Procedure should be used to ensure such participation in the decision, in the deliberations of the Council, with the decision of the Security Council members, of course. We believe it is in the interest of the Council members to allow parties of interest to present their viewpoints, especially those that are impacted by unfolding events. Acting with transparency and inclusivity and ensuring the presence of a wide range of voices in the Security Council meetings is a key. The work of the Security Council is of interest to all UN member states and to the wider community in general. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Romania for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Austria.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start to thank Shamala and Lorraine for the briefings and to emphasize that Austria aligns itself with the statement delivered by the Accountability, Coherence and Transparency Group. The working methods of the UN Security Council might seem like a merely technical matter, but to the contrary, we believe clear and transparent rules of procedure are inherently political. They ensure a level playing field for all members and provide legitimacy to the Council's proceedings and enhance the democratic nature of the Council. This ambition was also expressed in Action 41 of the Pact for the Future that Austria had the honor to facilitate with fellow IGN co-chair Kuwait. In this action, world leaders clearly committed to, and I quote, improve and democratize the working methods of the Security Council and strengthen its relationship with the General Assembly, end of quote. Let us make this commitment a reality. For Austria, the goal is clear. We need a council that is more effective, more transparent, more inclusive, and more accountable to the wider membership. Let me share just a few concrete remarks. There will be a long version of the speech uploaded later. First, the inability of the Security Council to act in the face of the most serious violations of international law and abhorrent humanitarian crisis weighs heavily on the credibility and on the legitimacy of the entire United Nations, on us. Too often the Security Council's work is hindered by permanent members exercising their veto rights. But the veto is not an absolute right, and it never was. It is constrained by the UN Charter in Article 27.3. We therefore call on the Council to ensure that full and consistent implementation of this article as to relate to parties of to a dispute. With a view to efficiency, we also urge the Council to fully implement Note 507 on its working methods, particularly with a view to a timely agreement on sharing arrangements for subsidiary bodies. With a view to the effectiveness of sanctions regimes, we encourage the Council to continue to improve due process in sanctions regimes. Austria therefore welcomes the creation of a separate IWG on sanctions. During its last Security Council membership, Austria, in close cooperation with other Council members, initiated procedural improvements in the 1267 Sanctions Committee and the creation of the function of the independent ombudsperson. Austria also greatly appreciates the role of the E10. E10 coherence and coordination is essential for the elected members to make a real impact on the Council. With a view to penholdership, we therefore encourage the Council to continue the practice of co-penholderships and to distribute penholderships more evenly between permanent and elected members. With a view to the accountability of the Council to the wider membership, we highly welcome the current practice of monthly wrap-up sessions by Council presidencies, and we encourage Council members to continue this effort. Mr. President, as a former co-chair of the IGN, Austria greatly appreciates that over the past years a clear link has been established between the IGN and the IWG, and we encourage the Council to continue this practice. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Austria for the statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, President. My delegation aligns itself with the statement that will be delivered by Switzerland on behalf of the ACT. I think it is a privilege to appear once again in this chamber when there are still representatives of countries with whom we worked when we were on the Council ourselves during 2023-2024. And also in the presence of two briefers who supported us a great deal as we carried out our mandate. It is an honor to be here. It's also an opportunity for us to engage in some self-criticism and, on the basis of our recent experience, to think about how we can improve the Council's methods of work in the Council's day-to-day work. President, sometimes it's not necessary to amend norms to improve the Council's efficiency, but simply to stop doing things just because others are doing them, or because that's how it has been done in the past. It can be positive to break with established practices when they don't help the Council to fulfill its mandate. I would give you two examples. First of all, at the start of every meeting, the President says, and you said this morning, President, I will now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make a statement. Now, over the last few years, making a statement has become mandatory. The Secretariat assumes that all members of the Council will speak in every public meeting, regardless of what is on the agenda. And this also happens in closed meetings and even in consultations as well. In our 2 years on the Council, we also followed this practice, like all other members as well. The result? Long meetings every day, with many repetitive statements and providing information that had already been laid out in the SG's report and by the briefers. In the minutes from previous years, in past years, you could see it was quite unusual for all 15 members to take the floor in a meeting. And that meant the meetings were shorter, and that allowed members to devote less time to drafting statements and more time to participate at the appropriate level in negotiations on outcomes or in the timely distribution of the chairmanships of the subsidiary bodies. It would be useful to normalize once again the practice of taking the floor selectively and not seeing it as an obligation, but rather a contribution. Imagine what would happen if we didn't change anything and the number of members of the Council increased. Another example are the area formula meetings. And I think these have already been mentioned. Originally, they were a smart way of allowing members to hear those who were not able to be invited to a formal meeting, but whose accounts were important for the Council's work. Today, unfortunately, the area formula meetings have lost their original purpose, and they have really become side events that very often are forgotten a week later. They don't contribute to the Council's work, and sometimes they are organized as a result of the domestic politics of those convening the meetings. So before deciding to convene an area formula meeting, one should wonder if it is genuinely necessary and useful. In addition, it's worth bearing in mind that not all members have the resources to organize these meetings. Finally, President, I would like to refer to the importance of disseminating the scope of the norms and methods of work. Public opinion is very critical, not just about the results of the Council's work, and sometimes quite rightly so, but also with how the Council works, even though it works precisely as it was designed and according to the established norms. Even the members of the UN in the General Assembly sometimes criticize the Council, even though the Council is just operating as the Charter sets out. Improving the Council's methods of work and norms is a necessary permanent task. Reforming and updating the structures that were designed for other times is even harder, and we must work to make this come about. We must all respect and uphold the existing norms and protect the structures of multilateralism as well, which cost so much to build in the first place. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of India.
Mr. President, I'd like to congratulate Sierra Leone for the presidency of the Council and place on record our sincere appreciation for organizing the annual open debate on working methods. India also commends Japan for its active role in updating Note 507 last year in its capacity as chair of the Security Council Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions. I thank the briefers for their remarks. Security Council is central in the UN architecture as a principal organ that is primarily tasked with the responsibility of maintenance of international peace and security. As a UN organ whose sphere of functions covers a range of areas but membership limited to only 15 members, working methods of the Council are critical to its credibility, efficacy, efficiency, and transparency. This gains particular salience in a world beset with multiple crises and facing numerous challenges. Despite the standing of the Security Council in the UN, and even as we mark the 80th anniversary of UN's establishment, its rules of procedure continue to be provisional. Though these rules remain the cornerstone guiding the day-to-day functioning of the Council, their provisional status needs to change. The status of the rules of procedure must be commensurate with the stature of the UN Security Council. As a member state that served multiple times on the Council, I'd like to make the following points. First, selection of chairs of subsidiary bodies and penholderships needs to be carried out in a more transparent, objective, and time-bound manner. Chairs and penholderships are privileges that come with major responsibilities. Discussions in the Council on distribution of chairs and penholderships must prevent Council members with vested interest from being accorded these privileges. Obvious and outright conflicts of interest can have no place in the Council. Second, there must be greater transparency in the functioning of the subsidiary organs. A case in point is a manner in which listing requests are rejected. Unlike delisting decisions, these are done in a rather obscure manner, with member states that are not on the Council not being privy to details. Third, there must be greater coordination of the Council with other UN organs, particularly the UN General Assembly. A useful tool in this regard is a discussion of the annual UN Security Council report in the General Assembly. However, this must not be treated as a mere procedural exercise. The report must be more than a record of the Council proceedings and meetings during the year. India reiterates its call to make the annual UN Security Council report analytical in nature. Fourth, peacekeeping is an important Security Council domain. As the largest cumulative troop contributor, India stresses on the need for factoring in the inputs of the TCCs and PCCs for better implementation of peacekeeping mandates. This must be a consultative exercise. In this regard, I'd like to make two specific recommendations. Christmas tree mandates must be avoided and peacekeeping missions must revert to having plain vanilla mandates, and any expansion of peacekeeping mandates should be matched by proportionate increase in resources. Fifth, continuation of mandates that have outlived their utility for mere narrow political interests of certain states must not be allowed. This continued existence in a resource-constrained scenario is a drain on the United Nations and member states. At a time when member states are striving for greater streamlining and better rationalization under the UN80 framework, I urge the Council to undertake necessary measures on this front to bring about sunset clauses. Matters on which the Council is seized are also to be reviewed from time to time on the basis of their relevance and utility. Sixth, India would like to emphasize that addressing historical injustices to Africa in the Security Council, given the representation of 3 out of the 10 non-permanent members from the region, is primarily through Africa's inclusion in the permanent category. Mere expansion of the non-permanent category would not only not result in meaningful reform, but also fail to address historical injustices to Africa. Finally, working methods is one of the clusters in the IGN on Council reforms. Any improvements to this cluster must not be done in a piecemeal manner. These are to be part of a comprehensive effort towards making the Council reflective of the current geopolitical realities. The overall endeavor needs to be on redesigning the 8-decade-old architecture to make the UN Security Council fit for purpose, equipped to meet the ongoing and future challenges, and discharge its functions purposefully. For this, there must be expansion in both the permanent and non-permanent categories, with adequate representation for underrepresented and non-represented geographies through text-based negotiations in a time-bound manner. I reiterate that India stands fully ready to contribute to this end. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of India for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of the United Arab Emirates.
Mr. President,
I'd like to begin by thanking Sierra Leone for convening this timely open debate, as well as Ambassador Lawson, Ms. Sievers, and Ms. Candia Thompson for their briefings. I also commend Denmark and Pakistan for their leadership of the informal working group and pay tribute to Japan as the previous chair. Mr. President, with the high number of active conflicts around the globe, it is critical that the Council fulfills its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security. Refining the Council's working methods can contribute to making it more effective and better able to meet the world's expectations. In this context, I will share some reflections and proposals for the Council's consideration. First, the Council benefits when it draws on practical proposals on its working methods from the wider UN membership. One such proposal is that, where relevant, there should be a live list of co-sponsors for Security Council resolutions. This would improve transparency and add significant practical value. The United Arab Emirates also reiterates its support for the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in all aspects of the Council's work and encourages formalizing this through a presidential note. In addition, as we approach the selection process for the next Secretary General, we emphasize the importance of timely communication between the Council and the General Assembly, as well as full conformity with the UN Charter and relevant General Assembly resolutions. Second, the Council can bolster its effectiveness by flexibly selecting the most appropriate meeting formats and the most useful forms of participation. The Council should consider the full range of meeting formats, including those that are currently underutilized, with a view to facilitating clear-eyed deliberations and sound decisions. Based on the UAE's experience during our 2 Council presidencies, we have found that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to Rule 37 participation. While guiding principles on its application could prove useful, we caution against being too prescriptive. Rather, we should aim for guidance that provides flexibility and envisages the full spectrum of scenarios. This leads me to my final point. The organization of the Council's work requires thoughtful and prudent management. Given the steady increase in meetings, the Council should carefully consider the impact of this on its efficiency and effectiveness. Formal meetings can serve a purpose. However, a proliferation of meetings for their own sake should be avoided. Finally, to further increase efficiency, we encourage Council members who share common positions to consider delivering group statements, which can also serve the purpose of signaling consensus. The practice of the A3, and currently A3+, serves as a positive example in this regard. Mr. President, many thoughtful proposals have been shared by today's participants, and we trust that they will spur action to ensure a more efficient and effective Council. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United Arab Emirates for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Luxembourg.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Benelux countries, Belgium, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and my own country, Luxembourg. And although I will speak on behalf of 3 member states, I will try to keep the remarks succinct. We align ourselves with the statement to be made by my distinguished colleague, the Permanent Representative of Switzerland, on behalf of the ACT Group. We thank Sierra Leone for convening this open debate, and we express our gratitude also to the co-chairs of the Informal Working Group on Documentation and Other Procedural Questions, Denmark and Pakistan, and to Mrs. Lorraine Sievers and Ms. Shamala Kandia Thompson for their valuable inputs. The Benelux countries believe that improving the working methods of the Security Council is key to fostering its transparency, accountability, and effectiveness. We deeply regret that the Council often finds itself in a deadlock which prevents it from fully executing its mandate. And this failure to act has often devastating consequences for civilians affected by conflict. Mr. President, the Benelux countries would like to make 3 points. First, the use of the veto and the threat of use of the veto overshadow the Council's working methods and are at the root of the Council's paralysis. We therefore support initiatives to limit the use of the veto, such as the proposal made by France and Mexico, and the code of conduct developed by the ACT Group. We also believe that all members of the Council must adhere to Article 27.3 of the UN Charter. We encourage adding new language in Note 507 on the inclusion of a dedicated section on the use of the veto in the Council's annual report. Second, the significant delay in appointing chairs and co-chairs of subsidiary bodies of the Council for 2025 has had a negative impact on the work of the Council, including with regard to the protection of children in armed conflict and the implementation of the sanctions regimes created by the Council, which are of interest to the entire membership. We encourage Council members to find effective ways to ensure the timely appointment of chairs of its subsidiary bodies in the future. And third, as we prepare for the selection and appointment of the next Secretary General in 2026, we emphasize the importance of ensuring transparency and inclusivity throughout this process. It is essential that the process be conducted in full accordance with General Assembly Resolution 79327 and building on the good practices established in 2015 and 2016. Enhancing transparency in the Council's deliberations and reinforcing the role of the General Assembly are key. Mr. President, the Benelux countries remain firmly committed to supporting the improvement of the working methods of the Security Council. It is indeed in the interest of us all that the Council can fulfill effectively its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, acting on behalf of all of us. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Luxembourg for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks for this debate and to the briefers for their, like always, inspiring thoughts. And I have the honor to deliver these statements on behalf of the Accountability, Coherence and Transparency Group, ACT, composed of 27 member states from all regional groups working to strengthen the Security Council's efficiency, accountability and inclusiveness. The way in which this Security Council operates and reaches its decisions, Mr. President, is a matter of direct relevance to the entire UN membership. So let me mention some of the particularly relevant aspects, meaning the subsidiary bodies, the selection of the SG, Article 27.3 of the Charter and Note 507. On the work of the subsidiary bodies, it is essential for the proper functioning of the Council and for the implementation of its mandate. The ACT Group expresses its profound concern regarding the unprecedented delay in the appointment of chairs for the subsidiary bodies for 2025. We strongly encourage the Council to appoint the chairs without further delay, noting the 1st of October deadline has long passed once again. Gaps in leadership in these bodies cause delays in procedural planning as well as in substantive decision-making and reduce transparency. These shortcomings affect not only the Council's efficiency, but also its credibility and its ability to respond swiftly to threats to international peace and security. In the first instance, the Council must shoulder its responsibility to reach an agreement on time. Yet, we must also avoid a repeat of what we have seen this year. For instance, by further codifying and implementing the contingency of entrusting the Security Council presidencies of the month with chairing responsibilities or allowing chairs and vice chairs from preceding years to continue to conduct the tasks. This would safeguard the continuity and consistency of critical Council functions without interpretative discretion and avoid institutional paralysis. Given the Council's repeated inability to meet its own deadline, the ACT Group believes pragmatic and responsible steps must be made towards strengthening the Council's resilience and operational coherence. Second, to further strengthen the transparency of the Council's subsidiaries bodies, the ACT Group also recommends that discussions not only be centered on who leads them, but also on how they operate. We propose simple measures that would greatly improve institutional memory and give Member States better insight into the Council's work. One example is publishing and regularly updating the programs of work of subsidiary bodies, including the informal working group on documentation and the ad hoc working group on conflict prevention and resolution in Africa. We also encourage the Council to provide more information on the functioning and deliberations of subsidiary bodies in the monthly assessments of presidencies. These pragmatic measures would ensure institutional continuity, transparency, and predictability in the Council's work. My third point is on the process of selecting and appointing the Secretary General of the United Nations. This is one of the most consequential decisions in our organization, and we must try to design a more reliable, transparent, and inclusive process. For many years, the ACT Group has promoted reforms that enhance the transparency and inclusiveness of the process. We refer to our letter S/2025/175. Some of our recommendations were included in Resolution A-RES 79/327. Building on these milestones, the ACT Group recommends the following actions. First, to codify the selection process within the Security Council through establishing an agreed framework in the informal working group on documentation, aligning with Resolutions A/RES 79/327 and previous practice such as the 2015-2016 SG selection and appointment process. Second, to promote transparency and inclusiveness, we reiterate our call to the Security Council to enhance transparency of its deliberations. This includes an early agreement and announcement by the Council on whether straw polls should be conducted, on a possible mechanism for how such informal voting to be conducted, and how the wider UN membership is to be informed about progress in the Council's deliberations. In addition, the President of the General Assembly and the President of the Security Council should, in accordance with Resolution A/RES 79/327, jointly maintain and regularly update a public list of candidates, including the name, nominating states, vision statement, curriculum vitae, and campaign financing disclosures, published on a dedicated United Nations webpage. Fourth, ACT recalls the importance of the full and consistent application of Article 27.3 of the Charter. Ensuring respect for this provision is essential to uphold the integrity, impartiality, and credibility of the Council's decision-making. ACT encourages continued reflection within the Council on practical ways to ensure that voting practices remain fully consistent with the Charter. Finally, the ACT Group welcomes the work on updating Note 507 in 2024. We call for its consistent implementation and further development, for instance, with the proposals mentioned today and some further ideas that we will, in the interest of time, submit in writing. President, 80 years after its creation, the Security Council's credibility relies on its effectiveness and on the trust placed in it by the wider UN membership. Strengthening accountability, coherence and transparency in all aspects of the Security Council's work, including the appointment of subsidiary body chairs, the operation of these bodies, and the selection and appointment of the Secretary General, will help ensure that this trust is maintained. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for a statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Brazil.
Mr. President, I thank Sierra Leone for convening this open debate. The continuing improvement of the Security Council's working methods is a necessity for ensuring gains in both its effectiveness and legitimacy. There is wide-range recognition that there has to be a more meaningful participation of elected members in the drafting of outcome documents. We encourage elected members to take on greater responsibilities, particularly with regard to penholdership, promoting a more equitable division of labor in resolution negotiations. With 10 members, a united E10 can bring better balance to the Security Council and can be a valuable force in favor of meaningful action and a call on the permanent members' responsibility to act accordingly. Equally important is the inclusivity of the Council's debates. The participation of civil society representatives, particularly women, in briefings to this Council should be fostered. Their perspectives enrich the understanding of complex issues and strengthen the legitimacy of decisions. Mr. President, enhanced cooperation with the Peacebuilding Commission is paramount. The Council should benefit more from the critical mass produced by the PBC. The written advices issued by the PBC and the participation of the PBC chair in briefings to the Council ensure that the Commission's perspectives are formally integrated into the Council's consideration of relevant matters. The Security Council should consider diverse formats of engagement with the PBC, including by the practice of formally recommending that countries on its agenda transition to the PBC on a strictly voluntary basis in order to consolidate peace and prevent the relapse into conflict. This approach should reflect the longer-term perspective that peace building and sustaining peace demand. Mr. President, while improving working methods is vital, we must acknowledge a fundamental reality. No minor enhancement of the Security Council procedures can sufficiently address the severe lack of efficacy, legitimacy, and representativeness present in the Council's current composition. Its enlargement in both categories of membership is urgently needed. The Council cannot be fully legitimate and effective as long as the Global South remains sidelined and whole regions such as Latin America and the Caribbean and Africa are not represented in the permanent category. Any debate on working methods must be underpinned by the overarching framework of comprehensive reform, which includes this expansion. Improvements in working methods and reform are not separate objectives, but complementary elements of a single vision. Ultimately, to fulfill its mandate to maintain international peace and security, this body must work in an effective, transparent, and responsible manner with improved working methods and expanded membership guided by the purposes and principles of the Charter and the interests of all UN member states. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Brazil for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Kyrgyzstan.
Mr. President, at the outset, allow me to express our appreciation to the Presidency of Sierra Leone for convening today's significant discussion. This document represents an important step toward enhancing the efficiency, transparency, and inclusiveness of the Council's work. The principal body entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security. The Kyrgyz Republic, firmly committed to the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, fully supports these objectives and welcomes the progress achieved in their implementation. However, we would like to highlight the following points. First, we positively note the improvements in the Council's planning practices. The introduction of structured monthly programs, timely notifications of emergency meetings, and wrap-up briefings has contributed to a better balance between open and closed formats. This has enabled non-members of the Council, including small and developing states, to participate more actively in dialogue and decision-shaping processes. Second, the mechanism of panholdership has created new opportunities for greater involvement of elected members. To strengthen the voice of small and developing countries, it would be useful to encourage rotation among panholders, for instance, by limiting consecutive terms and promoting co-panholdership between representatives of Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Drawing on its own experience in peacekeeping and regional cooperation, Kyrgyzstan stands ready to contribute to such initiatives, particularly in areas related to border security as well as counter-terrorism. Third, we welcome the progress achieved in enhancing engagement with non-members through area formula meetings and Council's missions. At the same time, further efforts are needed to ensure full implementation of the Note, notably through timely access to documents for incoming members and through greater use of multilingualism so that all voices are heard equally. In this regard, Kyrgyzstan would like to propose an additional measure, the introduction of digital tools for dialogue with non-members. Referring to Section 3 and 9 of the Note, we suggest the creation of an online platform that would allow non-members and civil society representatives to submit ideas and feedback with built-in multilingual features as highlighted in Section 14. We believe this would reduce bureaucratic barriers and facilitate the participation of small and developing countries such as Kyrgyzstan. Mr. President, Kyrgyzstan believes that the consistent implementation of Node, complemented by innovative digital engagement, will strengthen confidence in the Council and enhance its ability to respond effectively to global challenges. Kyrgyzstan reaffirms its readiness to contribute constructively to the further improvement of the Council's working methods. Only through collective efforts and genuine partnership, including through modern, inclusive communication tools, we can ensure peace and stability for all nations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Kyrgyzstan for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of El Salvador.
Muchísimas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, President. I'd like to begin by thanking you for convening this debate. And I'd also like to express our thanks to Denmark and Pakistan as co-chairs of the working group for their constant work to guide this conversation, which is so necessary. We're grateful for this opportunity because this matter is of concern to all members. In line with the Charter, this body has the overarching responsibility for upholding international peace and security on behalf of all member states. That is why its methods of work must fully reflect the principles of transparency, inclusivity, and effectiveness. We think that working on these methods of work and making them clearer and more consistent is critical to strengthen the legitimacy of the Council and also its ability to act. The deep-seated divisions that persist between its members has often hindered the body from acting in the face of urgent crises, and that is why it is critical to avoid the methods of work being used to restrict the participation of other member states or to favor particular interests. It is impossible to ignore the impact of these matters. We think this is one of the major obstacles preventing the Council from taking timely action in situations that requires immediate urgent action. In the last few months, we have seen how necessary resolutions were not adopted, and even the threat of the veto has been wielded. These practices erode trust in the institution, and they also weaken and undermine the public perception of the United Nations' ability to respond to urgent crises. That is why we reiterate our appeal for there to be as much moderation as possible, particularly when there are mass atrocities concerning the use of the veto in line with the French-Mexican initiative and the ACT proposed code of conduct. We think that the vetoes should be adequately reflected in the Council's report. This will allow for greater transparency and also accountability before the General Assembly. And it is in this regard we'd like to underscore the importance of strengthening the interaction between the GA and the SC. As we know, the GA is the most representative forum of the entire organization. It is the voice of the 193 member states, and that is why we should foster more deliberations between the GA and the Council. There needs to be more feedback between the bodies, and there needs to be greater exchange of information for all member states to ensure that all members who are not members of the Council have timely information provided to them. A more open Council is also a more legitimate Council. That is why we think we need to beef up the inclusion of all member states in deliberations, particularly when we're talking about matters that directly affect their countries, regions, or interests. Public discussions should allow for genuine, meaningful participation, and the appropriate timely issuance of documents should be something that is more predictable as well. On the process for the appointment of the next Secretary General of the entire organization, we think that transparency and the full participation of all member states should be guaranteed. There must be a closer relationship between the Council and the GA in this context too, in order to ensure that the procedures are open, inclusive and also predictable. We trust that this issue can be more systematically addressed in the Council's working group on documentation and other procedural questions. We'd also like to stress the importance of strengthening the relations between the Council and the Peacebuilding Commission as well, because the Commission provides strategic analysis, experience from the ground, and also long-term experience, which is critical to ensure that mandates are more consistent, but also more sustainable. El Salvador supports the need for more inclusive, more predictable procedures for drafters and pen holders as well. This is necessary to ensure a more balanced representation in the drafting of the Council's products, but also it makes sure that elected members can be closely involved in this process, particularly as they may be directly affected by what is going on the ground. Lastly, President, the full, equal, meaningful participation of women is also a priority for El Salvador. The Women, Peace and Security agenda must be a cross-cutting matter throughout all of the Council's work, and this body should systematically incorporate data and analysis about the differentiated impact of conflicts on women and girls. We also need to update the Council's basic documents to reflect the current realities on the ground and the current standards in terms of women's participation. President, we reiterate our unwavering commitment to a more representative, more transparent, and more effective Security Council. But to do this, we need to strengthen and update the methods of work, not just as an administrative box-ticking exercise, but rather as a political, ethical imperative to respond appropriately to the crises that millions of people are affected by throughout the world. We in El Salvador will continue to participate constructively and actively in this effort. We are convinced that a council that works more effectively is a council that also better serves all people. Thank you.
I thank the representative of El Salvador for her statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Costa Rica.
Thank you very much, President. The procedural architecture of the Security Council is critical in terms of its ability to act to counter threats to international peace and security, and also to renew trust that member states have in this body. The current structures have some structural weaknesses that need to be corrected. In this context, I would like to make 4 points, President. First of all, on unofficial consultations, we have seen that there is advice provided in the note on consultations. Nevertheless, we see that the consultations that the Council undertakes remain quite opaque, and there is a lack of information for other member states about what is being discussed. Secondly, the penholdership has often been concentrated in the hands of the permanent members. Nevertheless, when elected members are able to act as co-penholders, the draft resolutions are more balanced and they can lead to greater consensus. The current practice looks at this practice as an exception, but we believe that it should be a standard procedure for the drafting of resolutions that directly affect elected members and on which they can provide specific advice. Thirdly, in terms of decisions on peacekeeping operations, currently the process involves countries that provide troops and police to missions only, and the area formula meetings are characterized as informal meetings. In addition to this, we see that there is a delay in the issuance of decisions. We think it is clear that prior consultations need to be undertaken with countries who provide troops to peacekeeping operations. This needs to be done in a timely manner and it needs to be systematic. Fourth, the Council should activate the mechanisms under Article 34 of the Council to avoid conflicts from escalating. There needs to be systematic follow-up, and this needs to be part of the briefings and the early warning mechanisms. This procedural reconfiguration would allow the Council to intervene when the political situations allow. Rwanda, Yemen, and Myanmar are all clear examples that the capacity of analysis existed, and that is why the early warning systems need to be used and implemented effectively. President, the methods of work of the Council are an institutional reality. We think that the reforms need to be undertaken, and we believe that a more transparent, more inclusive Council is the only way for the Council's mandate to be fulfilled. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Costa Rica for his statement. There are still a number of speakers remaining on my list for this meeting. I intend, with the concurrence of members of the Council, to suspend the meeting until this afternoon, shortly after 3 p.m., following the adjournment of the 10,044th meeting. The meeting is suspended.